Welcome to The Cellar. Back in 1997, a woman named Judy Smith would travel with her husband to a work conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Prior to getting on the plane, Judy discovered that she had forgotten her driver's license. Her husband boarded the plane and continued on to his work conference, while Judy made the trip back home to collect her ID. She would board a later flight and arrive in Philadelphia that evening. Judy would reconnect with her husband at the hotel, and the following day, she went out sightseeing while her husband attended his work conference. Judy was supposed to meet back up with her husband at 5 p.m. But as 6:30 p.m. rolled around, her husband Jeff started to become worried. He didn't know it at the time, but he would never see his wife again. Months would go by before some answers in the case were found some 600 miles away. Those answers have done nothing but puzzle investigators for decades. This is the unsolved mystery of Judy Smith. Judith Judy Louise Eldridge was born on December 15, 1946 in Hyannis, Massachusetts. Hyannis is a village that is located on the Cape Cod Peninsula. Hyannis over the years became a major tourist destination. It is also the commercial and transportation hub of Cape Cod, leading to Hyannis adopting the nickname of Capital of the Cape. The village is said to have roughly 14,400 total residents as of 2024. Now, there's not a lot of information about Judy's childhood, but growing up, she was described as being an extremely kind and caring person. She loved helping people, and this love led her to attending college. Following her graduation, she would become a home healthcare nurse. In Judy's personal life, she would end up married and divorced on 2 separate occasions. Her second marriage resulted in her having 2 children, Craig and Amy. Following that second divorce, Judy was living and working in the Boston, Massachusetts area. It was in the mid-'80s when Judy would meet Jeffrey Smith. Jeffrey was a lawyer in the area, and the pair met through Jeffrey's father. See, Jeffrey's father had to undergo surgery on his throat, and during his recovery, Judy was assigned to him as his home care nurse. Jeffrey was enamored with Judy as he saw how caring she was to her patients. In fact, on one occasion, Judy had to get creative and had used a window curtain rod in the absence of a proper holder for his father's IV bag. Jeffrey was impressed with Judy's unrelenting devotion towards his father's well-being. Jeffrey, at the time, was also divorced. He, like Judy, had a child from his prior marriage. Jeffrey and Judy were instantly attracted to one another, and they soon began dating. They would date for many years, as both had been through divorce and didn't want to rush down that road again. It would take some time, but after about 7 years of seeing each other, the pair finally moved in together. And then after 3 happy years living together, the pair would finally seal the deal and tie the knot in the fall of 1996. To give some further backstory on Jeffrey, he was a legal representative for the Northeast Pharmaceutical Conference. The NPC are an organization of executives and researchers based out of the New England area. With some backstory out of the way, we will now jump ahead to April 9, 1997. Jeffrey Smith, at the time, was asked to attend a conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The conference was set to run from April 9th to April 11th. In the past, Jeffrey typically went to these conferences by himself, but on this occasion, Judy wanted to go so the pair could spend some time together during Jeffrey's downtime. Jeffrey agreed to the idea, and on April 9th, the pair loaded their luggage up and began their trip to the Logan International Airport, located in Boston, Massachusetts. Their flight was scheduled to take off around 1:30 p.m. As the pair made their way into the airport, Judy would realize she made a mistake. She did not have her driver's license on her. She left it back at home. Without her license on hand, FAA regulations were not going to allow her to board the flight. Judy at the time did not want to hold Jeffrey up from his work trip, so she told him to go ahead and board the flight. She made plans to get on a later plane and would soon make her way back to their home. Judy then recovered her license, and at 7:30 p.m. that evening, she finally boarded the plane to Philadelphia. Judy would arrive in Philly and make her way to the hotel that the pair were staying in. Judy, who was upset with herself for forgetting her license, brought flowers with her to give Jeffrey as a way of saying sorry for the entire incident. The pair would reconnect that evening at the hotel before eventually settling down for the night. The next day, the pair woke up and began getting ready. Jeffrey had to attend the conference for the vast majority of the day, so Judy informed him that she was going to go out sightseeing. The pair planned to meet back up together at the hotel at around 5:30 p.m. Jeffrey had a cocktail party that evening, and the pair were planning to attend together. 5:30 p.m. would roll around, and Judy never arrived back at the hotel room. Jeffrey thought initially that maybe there had been some kind of miscommunication, so he went down to the cocktail party, but Judy was nowhere to be found there either. As the night continued on, Jeffrey stated that he went back and forth between the party and the hotel room numerous times, but Judy never arrived back at the hotel. As the night wore on, Jeffrey became more and more concerned. He knew that his wife had planned to go on one of the city's tour buses, so he decided to catch a cab and have the driver bring him along the same route that the bus would have gone on. Sadly, this cab ride would bring no answers as to the whereabouts of Judy Smith. Not knowing what else to do, Jeffrey contacted the police in an effort to file a missing persons report. When Jeffrey attempted to do so, the police were initially very dismissive of the entire thing. Sadly, this happens in far too many cases. Jeffrey was left being told that he had to wait at least 24 hours before he could file the report. But Jeffrey didn't sit idle. With the job that Jeffrey had, well, he had some connections. Two connections were that of the Philadelphia mayor, Ed Rendell, and Pennsylvania House Representative John Purcell. Both men had attended the conference, and Jeffrey swiftly located both men and asked them to do something for his missing wife. The men would oblige Jeffrey, and soon the search for Judy was underway. The first thing to look at is, what did Judy have with her at the time? From reports, most of Judy's belongings were still in the hotel room. The things that were deemed missing would be Judy's wallet and her red backpack that she often used as a replacement for a purse. Jeffrey also believed that Judy had roughly $200 on her at the time, but he couldn't be certain if that was the exact amount. The police were now on the case, and one of the first things they did was look into Jeffrey himself. Some of the investigators at the time questioned whether or not Judy had ever even made it to Philadelphia in the first place. The first thing the police pointed to was Judy forgetting her driver's license. It's reported that Judy was an experienced traveler, even once traveling to Thailand by herself. But Jeffrey pointed out that the majority of the time Judy had flown, it wasn't mandated that she have her license on her. The FAA regulation had only gone into effect about 18 months earlier, so it's plausible that she either A, just forgot the license, or B, didn't remember that she was going to need to have it with her. Either way, police began looking into whether or not they could prove that Judy had made it to Philly. The hotel did not have a guest register, so there was no way to clearly prove Judy had made it to the hotel, although a desk clerk at the hotel did tell police that he remembered seeing Judy there. Police continued to look for eyewitnesses, while at the same time they began going through the couple's hotel room. One detective would later report on some odd findings. The detective looked through Judy's clothing for the trip and noticed that none of her clothes seemed to have been worn at all, which was viewed as odd because if she had arrived the night before, you would presume she would have gotten ready the next day and changed into fresh, clean clothes. But there was no evidence that she did so. Now, statistically, when someone is killed or goes missing, the significant other, a lot of the time, had something to do with it. The police continued to focus some of their efforts on Jeffrey. They soon asked Jeffrey to take a polygraph test, but he was not cooperative. Now, the police say he refused, while Jeffrey states that that's not true. Jeffrey stated that he wanted the FBI to administer the polygraph, and he also wanted the FBI involved in the search for his wife. The police would later state that they told Jeffrey this was not possible, and made it very clear to him that the FBI would not be getting involved. Nonetheless, Jeffrey never took a polygraph test, even though the police had arranged for it to take place. Take that information as you will in this case. Jeffrey soon hired 2 private investigators to help in the search for Judy. He also distributed thousands of copies of his wife's missing persons flyer to hospitals all across the country. These efforts would later have a big impact overall on the case. Now, I did find some information as far as whether or not Judy did or didn't make it to Philadelphia, as I found a report that stated that Judy was indeed listed on the passenger manifest for the 7:30 p.m. flight from Boston to Philly. I'd like to believe that this, at the very least, tells us that Judy was indeed in Philadelphia on April 9, 1997. Now, over the course of the investigation, numerous tips would come in with people claiming to have seen Judy Smith. We will touch on some of those eyewitness statements, the first being that of a hotel employee who remembers Judy asking him about the tour buses and where she could board one. Another eyewitness, a bus driver, claimed to have picked Judy up. This driver also claimed to have let her off near the hotel at approximately 3 p.m. on the day she went missing. Now, there was also another claim that came in that someone saw Judy leaving a Greyhound bus station, but it's unclear if this was really Judy or why she would have even been at a Greyhound station. A local homeless man also came forward, claiming to have slept on a bench next to Judy one night. As with a lot of these claims, there's just no hard evidence to back any of them up. Now, a more prominent sighting of Judy did come in from a cashier at the Deptford Mall in New Jersey. This mall is around 22 miles away from Philadelphia, and the cashier stated that the woman she saw was looking for clothes for her daughter. The lady was said to have been wearing a red backpack, and the cashier also said that the woman told her that her husband was attending a conference in Philadelphia. Now, this all sounds promising, but a confusing aspect of this claim is what happened when this woman tried to leave the store, as it's reported that the woman seemed to become confused as she tried to get a young girl in the store to leave with her, claiming that the girl was her daughter, when it was clear she was not. I wish there was more details and information to this claim, but that's all we have to go on based on what's been reported. If this was indeed Judy, then perhaps she was suffering from some sort of mental distress. Even with these promising leads, the case soon grew cold over the course of the next few months. Police were left wondering if Jeffrey had anything to do with his wife's disappearance. At the same time, police also wondered if Judy had simply left under her own free will, perhaps having a midlife crisis of sorts. From all reports, Judy's disappearance took a toll on Jeffrey. He had to cut back on his work, and he was struggling day to day with his wife missing. Judy's daughter spoke very highly of her stepfather during this time. In fact, most of Judy's friends and family all had positive things to say about Jeffrey. The only person who wasn't in line with everyone else was Judy's friend, Carolyn Dickey. Carolyn was later quoted as saying, "At the time this happened, Jeff and Judy's marriage was very tenuous. I believe that something did happen that triggered her to want to have some time away from Jeff." If this is the truth, then where did Judy go? And why would Judy leave all her friends and family in the dark as to her whereabouts? Judy went missing in April of 1997, and 5 months would go by, and it didn't seem like the police were any closer to figuring out what happened to Judy Smith. But on September 7th of 1997, a father and son who were out deer hunting together in North Carolina's Pisgah National Forest would make a shocking discovery. The pair discovered human bones located near the Stony Fork picnic area, which runs along Chestnut Creek. This area is located around 9.3 miles or 15 kilometers away from Asheville, North Carolina. The police were soon contacted, and an investigation into the scene was underway. The bones were found scattered around a 300-foot or 91-meter area. It was presumed that wild animals had done this. In the center of said area, a shallow grave was ultimately discovered. In the shallow grave, a large amount of skeletal remains were recovered. The skeleton was still clothed at the time, and it was clear that there had been an effort to bury and conceal the body. The police collected the remains and also found some items in the area. They found a blue and black backpack, clothing, a wedding ring, a pair of sunglasses, and $167 in cash. Once everything was collected from the scene, a medical exam was performed on the remains. It was found that the victim was a Caucasian female between the age of 40 and 55 years old. It was also determined that whoever this was, they had indeed been killed months earlier. Cuts found on the clothes and bones indicated that this person had been stabbed to death. A horrible way to go. Now, typically when a body is found many states away, it can take a long time to identify this person. But as I stated before, Jeffrey had gone to great lengths in getting his wife's missing persons flyer all across the United States. This effort would end up paying off, as a doctor in North Carolina had heard about Judy's disappearance via one of Jeffrey's flyers. This doctor would soon call the police, and he suggested they look into the Judy Smith case. The police would reach out and obtain Judy's dental records, and they soon had answers. The body they had recovered was indeed that of Judy Smith. But with this discovery came more questions than answers. Where had Judy gotten the new clothing she was found to have been wearing when she died? This clothing in particular was deemed suitable for hiking, so was Judy in North Carolina to do some hiking? Also, why was she found with a completely different backpack, and where was Judy's red backpack? And let's not forget the two most puzzling questions of them all. How did Judy end up over 600 miles away in North Carolina? And who killed her? There's many theories, but no clear-cut answers in this case. Now, before we dive into some theories, let's touch on some eyewitness accounts in Asheville, North Carolina. Joanne Stucker, a cashier, had this to say. She seemed very alert to me. She was very pleasant. I didn't see anything about her that would indicate that she wasn't right in any way. She told me her husband was an attorney and that they were from Boston, and that they had been in Pennsylvania and he was at a convention, and she had decided to come down here. Another sighting was that of a deli owner who claimed to have seen a woman that looked like Judy drive up to her store in a gray sedan. This woman then entered and purchased $30 worth of sandwiches in a toy truck. If this was Judy, where did that car come from? And who was she purchasing sandwiches in a toy truck for? As you can see, if any of these sightings are credible, they just add more questions than answers in the end. The police would eventually determine that they did not think Jeffrey had anything to do with his wife's murder. Jeffrey was very overweight, and investigators don't believe he was physically capable of bringing Judy to the woods of North Carolina. Also, based on evidence found, Judy was dressed in clothes that were designed for hiking that area at that time of the year. In looking into this case, all signs point to the fact that Judy may have very well hiked willingly into the North Carolina wilderness. But why? Why did she take off from Philadelphia? Where did she initially go? How did she get to North Carolina? Did she know someone there? Was Judy familiar with her killer? Or did she happen upon someone at the wrong place and wrong time? All are possibilities. One prominent theory in this case is that Judy may have encountered Gary Michael Hilton, aka the National Forest serial killer. Now, Gary is known to have killed 4 people from 2007 to 2008 in the southern Appalachian Mountains. Now, these victims are all connected to Gary over a decade after Judy's case. But what people point to is one of Gary's victims, who was found tied to a tree not far from where Judy's body had been recovered a decade earlier. Could Judy Smith have been one of Gary's first victims? It's not clear, but it's possible there are more victims of Gary Hilton out there yet to be discovered. So far, there's been no direct connection made, but it has left people wondering for decades. Now, sadly, in 2005, Jeffrey Smith would pass away. He never got answers as to how or why his wife ended up dead over 600 miles away in North Carolina. Judy's case remains open and unsolved to this very day. Now, I'd love to hear what you all think about this case. I think Judy willingly went to North Carolina, but it's a truly puzzling story. So if you or someone you know has any information in regards to the Judy Smith case, please call the Buncombe County Sheriff's Department at 828-250-6670. As always, I'd like to end things by sending my deepest condolences to all of Judy Smith's friends and family. I truly do hope that answers and justice will one day be had for all. A 27-year-old schoolteacher, loved by all her students, faculty, family, and friends. A woman that had so much life left before her prior to that horrifying day in January of 2011. Ellen Greenberg was in the process of making herself a fruit salad when her life abruptly ended. She was stabbed 20 times, the final blow going straight into her heart. Police would ultimately declare her death as self-inflicted, but was it? This is the absolutely baffling case of 27-year-old Ellen Rae Greenberg. Ellen Rae Greenberg was born in New York City on June 23, 1983. Ellen would earn a degree in communications from Penn State University. She would earn her teaching credentials from Temple University and would ultimately become a first-grade teacher at Juniata Park Academy in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Ellen loved teaching, but as with any job, it did have its downsides. Long hours and constant stress would later weigh on Ellen. The anxiety Ellen was under would continue to grow with time, eventually leading to her speaking with her parents. Her parents later stated that she had expressed a desire to move back home. She was currently engaged and in the midst of planning her wedding, something that can also be extremely stressful in its own right. Her parents inquired into what exactly was bothering Ellen, and she would assure them that her anxiety had nothing to do with her personal life. It was all in relation to the stress she was under as a teacher. Ellen and her fiancé, Samuel Goldberg, had been together for around 3 years. Samuel was a 28-year-old television producer. From early reports in the story, Ellen and Samuel had a good relationship. Ellen's parents ultimately trusted their daughter, and she had never expressed anything negative within their relationship. But Ellen's parents were concerned with the stress and anxiety their daughter was under. They did not want her to throw her job and career opportunities away by moving back home in a rash decision. So her parents ended up convincing Ellen to see someone about her anxiety. According to reports, she had been seen a handful of times and had been prescribed a low dose of Xanax as well as Ambien and Klonopin. At no point did Ellen's therapist see her as being a danger to herself or others. She was never viewed as anything more than just a stressed-out teacher, something that's all too common in today's day and age. And that now brings us to January 26, 2011. Ellen would wake and get ready to go to work like she had done numerous times prior. She would arrive at school and begin her day teaching her class of first graders. As the morning progressed, a blizzard would end up coming through the city of Philadelphia, covering everything in a thick sheet of white powder. The rest of the school day would end up being canceled, and staff and students would be sent home early. Ellen was ultimately relieved and excited for the extra time she would have away from work. She would begin her trip home, first stopping at a gas station and filling up her car. Ellen would leave the gas station and arrive home, meeting up with her fiancé and proceeding to spend the afternoon together. At 2:30 p.m., Ellen would make a phone call to a restaurant called Vetri. It's unclear if she was confirming, making, or canceling a reservation at the time. At 3:47 p.m., Ellen would send a final text from her phone. The details of this text have remained confidential. At 4:46 p.m., there was some activity on Ellen's computer. Exactly what that activity was has also remained confidential. At 4:50 p.m., Ellen's fiancé Sam would enter the gym that is located on the first floor of the Venice Loft Apartments, the apartments where he and Ellen resided on the 6th floor. At 5:26 p.m., Sam would exit the gym after working out for about 36 minutes. Sam would then place a phone call at 6:14 p.m. and receive a phone call at 6:26 p.m. We will dive into those phone calls a bit later on in the video. Now, according to Sam Goldberg, he would return to the couple's apartment after his workout. Based on the timeline, it would be presumed that this was around 5:30 p.m. According to Sam, he would attempt to enter the apartment, but upon opening the door, it would catch on the swing bar lock on the inside. After calling out to Ellen, Sam would then send a handful of texts to his fiancée. "Hello. Open the door. What are you doing? I'm getting pissed. Hello? You better have an excuse. What the fuck? Ah, you have no idea." The text would start at 5:32 p.m. and come to an end at 5:54 p.m. According to Sam, he would head downstairs and speak to a security guard about getting the door to the apartment open. Sam would later tell the police that the security guard would eventually accompany him upstairs and to the couple's apartment. It is around 6:30 that Sam would force his way into the apartment. He would enter looking for his fiancée, and he would eventually locate Ellen's body resting in the corner of the kitchen on the floor. She was in between the oven and the sink, with her upper body in a slouched state against the kitchen cupboards. Ellen wasn't moving, and she was completely covered in blood. Sam would soon place the following 911 call.
Help, I need a everything now. I just walked into my apartment. My fiance's on the floor with blood everywhere.
What is the address?
4601 Flat Rock Road. Please come. Help.
4601
now. Flat Rock Road.
Is this a house or apartment?
Oh no. Oh no. It's an apartment.
What apartment number?
Please, Harry, please.
Where is she bleeding from?
I don't know. I can't tell.
No. So you have to calm yourself down in order to get you some help.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm looking at her right now. I can't see anything. There's nothing broken. She's bleeding. Ellie.
You don't know where she's bleeding from? Can't tell where the blood's coming from?
I think her head. I think she hit her head, But it's everywhere.
Okay,
it's everywhere.
Think she might have fallen? Do you know what happened?
She may have slipped. There's blood on the table. Her face is a little purple.
Okay, hold on for rescue for her. Stay on the phone. Philadelphia Fire Department 842. What's the address? No.
4601 Flat Rock Road. Please hurry.
4601 Flat Rock?
Yes.
What's wrong?
I went downstairs to go work out. I came back up. The door was latched. My fiance's inside. She wasn't answering. So after about a half hour, I decided to break it down. I see her now just on the floor with blood. She's not responding.
Okay, is she breathing? Look at her chest. I need you to calm down, and I need you to look at her chest. It's really.
I really don't think she is.
Listen to me. Someone's on the way. Look at her chest. Is she flat on her back?
She's on her back. So I bring her.
Look at her chest and tell me if it's going up and down, up and down.
I don't see her moving.
Okay. Do you know how to do CPR?
I don't.
Okay. I'll tell you what to do. Okay, until they get there. I want you to keep her flat on her.
God.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, okay.
Are you willing to do CPR with me over the phone until they get there?
I have to, right?
Okay, so get her flat on her back, bare her chest, okay? You want to rip her shirt off. Okay? Kneel down by her side.
Oh, my God. Ellie, please.
Listen, you can't freak out, sir, because you
Okay, I'm trying not. Her shirt won't come off. It's a zipper. Oh, my God, she stabbed herself.
Where?
She fell with a knife. Oh, no, her knife's sticking out.
Her what?
There's a knife sticking out of her heart.
Oh, she stabbed herself?
I guess so. I don't know where she fell on it. I don't know.
Okay, well, don't touch it.
Okay, so I just let her here now. I mean, what do I do?
No, I mean, you can't. If the knife is in her chest, it's going to be kind of hard for you to do CPR at this time.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Police with operator. 277.
Is someone coming here?
Yes, they are. You said 4601 Flat Rock, right?
Yes.
Okay, someone's on the way.
The 911 call would come to an end at around 6:33 p.m. Those first responders would do what they could for Ellen, but it was apparent rather quick that she was gone. The knife plunged straight into her heart had taken her life. Ellen Greenberg would be pronounced deceased at 6:40 p.m. Now, before we head forward, I want to backtrack a little bit to the 2 phone calls that Sam placed before breaking into his apartment and dialing 911. The first phone call was to his cousin, Kamian Schwartzman. The follow-up call he received was from his uncle, James Schwartzman. Now, you may ask why that's important. Well, Sam's cousin, Kamian, was an up-and-coming lawyer at the time. Kamian's father would then call Sam back. His name is James Schwartzman, and he was a powerful political attorney at the time, and he is now a judge in the state of Pennsylvania. The fact that Sam called 2 relatives who happen to be powerful lawyers with powerful connections has raised a lot of eyebrows and questions within this case. Now, it could be as simple as he wanted to know the legalities behind breaking down his own door, or it could have been for far more nefarious reasons. I want to make it clear, these are just ideas that have been tossed around within this case. Another piece of information in this case is the fact that Kamian showed up at the apartment complex around the same time the police arrived. Now, I've seen it reported that he showed up at 6:39 p.m. and that the police arrived minutes later, but I've also found records that the police showed up at 6:36 p.m. and I've seen it reported that they showed up at close to 6:40. Another piece of information that I've also seen reported is that Kamian arrived at 6:34 p.m., just 1 minute after the 911 call. Either way, it appears Kesse and Schwartzman arrived before police did to the scene of the crime. It also appears that any conversations Sam had with the police department at the time were with his lawyer already present. It begs the question, why did Sam have Kesse come to the apartment complex? At the time he had last spoken to Kesse, according to Sam, he had not entered the apartment nor found his fiancée as of yet. Moving on, another piece of information in this case that is suspicious is the lie that Sam told the police at the scene. According to Sam, he had the security guard at the apartment complex escort him to his apartment to break the door down. This gave Sam an alibi to his whereabouts, as well as someone who could verify that the door was indeed locked from the inside. According to the original police documents, this detail indeed affected the way the police viewed the crime scene and case at the time. But it was later proven that the security guard did not ever go up to Sam and Ellen's apartment. According to policy, he was not allowed to break down their door. So all the security guard did was call Ellen twice before Sam left and proceeded to break into his own apartment on his own. This falsity has led many to believe that Sam may have a lot more to hide within this case, but we will dive more into that later. Now let's go ahead and dive into the crime scene. Police would speak with Sam at the crime scene as well as back at the station. According to Sam, Ellen had to have ended her own life while he was at the gym. There was no other scenario he believed could be true. Based on Ellen's anxiety and medication usage, as well as Sam's thoughts, the police were quick to believe Ellen did this to herself. The investigation of Ellen's apartment showed nothing had been stolen. Also, the couple lived on the 6th floor, and there was only one way in and out of the apartment, aside from a door that led to a small ledge and lookout. That ledge was so small that only Spider-Man himself could have scaled it. Also, with the snow coming down that day, no footprints or signs that the ledge or door had been accessed by an intruder would be found. Now, there were some signs of forced entry on the lock of the door to the apartment, but if you're to believe Sam's account of what happened, it's believed that this damage simply occurred when Sam forced his way into the apartment. But many question whether or not the door had been locked from the inside by Ellen at all, or if Sam himself had manipulated the lock to make it look and appear like a forced entry. Now, I want to make it clear that Sam has never been charged with anything in this case. These are all simply thoughts and ideas that I have had based on the evidence I have looked through. Continuing on, Ellen's arms also showed no defensive wounds whatsoever. With this initial information gathered, the police would far too quickly rule Ellen's death as self-inflicted. They believed that she locked herself in and simply plunged a steak knife into her heart. The handle of the blade would be forensically tested and would come back with only Ellen's DNA on it. All this information led the police to quickly believe that Ellen had been stressed out and ultimately decided she didn't want to live any longer. It seemed the police quickly wanted to close this case, but is that what really happened? It's not what I believe happened, so let's dive into the autopsy results. Dr. Marlon Osborne, the Philadelphia medical examiner, would perform the autopsy the following day. His initial conclusions are alarming, to say the least. The most frightening realization was that Ellen didn't have one stab wound. She had 20. 10 were located in the back of her neck, 1 in her stomach, 1 located in her scalp, and 8 were in her chest. How could someone do this to themselves? There were also numerous bruises found all over Ellen's body. How did she get these bruises is a question we simply don't have a clear answer to. Now, I want to point out another detail in this case. At least one wound in Ellen's neck could have potentially caused paralysis, making it impossible for her to deliver the rest of the blows to herself. This detail has been debated, with some reports detailing that this blow is believed to have actually happened after Ellen was already deceased. Either way, these particular wounds open up far more questions than answers. Now, is it possible for someone to take a knife to themselves? 100% it is. But typically in cases where self-infliction occurs, people don't usually do it more than a few times. Usually the first or second blow is enough, and anything further is just excruciatingly painful, to say the least. So the idea that Ellen did this to herself 20 times seems absolutely baffling. Now, I am not a medical examiner, I'm just someone who researches and gives my thoughts on cases. But do I believe Ellen did this to herself? No. Just no way do I believe it. Maybe if the wounds were only located on her chest, but the idea that she also did that to the back of her neck, as well as the one stab wound to the stomach, it would have been excruciatingly painful, and there are much simpler ways for one to end their being. Now, Dr. Osborne's initial findings led him to believe that Ellen's case was indeed a homicide. He initially did not see it any other way. But then, a month and a half later, he was approached by the Philly Police Department, the DA's office, and the chief medical examiner. When they met with Dr. Osborne, they requested that he overturn his initial findings and rule the COD as self-inflicted. Under great pressure, Dr. Osborne changed his ruling as he was told. In his new findings, he concluded that the blow to the neck that may have initially paralyzed Ellen may have actually only numbed her, making it so that she could then proceed with more blows while not feeling any pain. With Dr. Osborne's report now changed, the police were able to rule Ellen's case as closed. A crime in and of itself, if you ask me. Following this ruling, Ellen's family were quick to hire their own team to investigate what really happened to their daughter. They simply could not believe that she had done this to herself. One finding that was made by a neuropathologist that the family hired involved the puncture in Ellen's neck. She found that there was no hemorrhaging around the spine at all, which would mean that when the wound was made, Ellen no longer had a pulse. If Ellen was already gone, then how could she have struck herself in the neck and still managed to strike herself in the heart afterwards? Ellen's family would also hire a company that reconstructed all 20 of the wounds she had suffered. Based on their findings, they believed there was no way they could have been self-inflicted. They were very confident that an assailant had to have done this to her. Every step of the way, Ellen's family received answers that did not line up with the police's ultimate rulings on the case. After spending tons of their own money on experts, Ellen's family were left confident that their daughter did not do this to herself. So why were the police so determined to rule this case as self-inflicted and put it all to bed? Was Ellen's case an example of a major cover-up? If so, did it have to do with Sam and his powerful family connections? Or could there have been an unknown assailant that did this to Ellen? Now, based on the police's initial findings, the crime scene would end up being cleaned up the very next day. Also, that very next day, James Schwartzman requested access to Ellen and Sam's apartment in order to get a suit for Sam to attend the funeral. According to reports, a suit was not the only thing removed from the apartment, as Ellen's laptop, as well as cell phones and other items were all taken at the time. The crime scene was then cleaned up that very same day, prior to Dr. Osborne's initial autopsy reports being released. His initial findings would lead the police to get a search warrant to go back into the apartment, but by the time they went back into the apartment, it had already been cleaned, and they did not get the cell phones or the laptop from Mr. Schwartzman until the following day, on January 29th. Meaning that any possible evidence could have already been wiped away before the police had it in their custody. To add to the suspicions, why did Sam call his powerful uncle and cousin before he supposedly found his fiancée? And why did his cousin show up at the apartment when he did? Why did Sam lie about the security officer going with him to his apartment when he went to break down the door? Was the door really locked from the inside, or was it just made to look that way? Why was the scene of the crime released so quickly and then cleaned before autopsy results were even had? Why was the police so quick to rule Ellen's case as self-inflicted when it was clear on initial autopsy findings that it wasn't? Why was Dr. Osborne pressured into changing his report weeks and weeks after his initial findings had been made? Now, I'm a believer in Occam's razor. The simplest answer is typically the correct one in most cases. Far often when someone's life is claimed in a case like this, the significant other had something to do with it. Not always, but quite often. Now, the idea that an unknown assailant did this is something I want to look at briefly. Could someone have done this in the short amount of time that Sam went to the gym to work out? It's possible, but doesn't seem very probable. One piece of evidence I want to point to is Ellen having 0 defensive wounds. Now, if someone else had done this to her, you would think that she would have fought back and there would have been some form of a defensive wound on her body. So why aren't there any? Well, my thought on this is if she didn't see it coming, and the only person that was with her at the time was someone she trusted endlessly, well, you probably see my point there. If someone got the jump on her, she could have been taken down quickly before she even had a chance to react. My gut tells me that that is what happened in this case. Another bizarre piece of this case has to do with the 911 call. As you heard, many listen to this call and say that Ellen's fiancé Sam is doing a terrible job acting. Now, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt in cases like this, as people have been known to react in bizarre ways under stressful scenarios like the one Sam was in. The bizarre thing for me was that Sam didn't notice the large blade sticking out of Ellen's chest until he went to perform CPR. Based on the call, he made it sound as if Ellen's shirt was somehow covering the knife handle and he didn't notice until he unzipped her shirt. Based on all the evidence, it's a bit bizarre that he didn't notice anything protruding from her chest right off the bat. You would think that would be the first thing he would notice. Also, if the shirt was zipped over the knife, how did that happen? How could Ellen have struck herself 20 times, including a final blow to the heart, and then what? She zipped her shirt up over the blade before she passed on? It just makes zero logical sense. Also, why was Sam's initial reaction in the 911 call to be that Ellen did this to herself? If you walk into your apartment and find your loved one bleeding on the kitchen floor with a knife in their chest, would your first reaction be that they did this to themselves? I struggle with that greatly. Add to all of this the aggressive text that Sam sent Ellen when he allegedly couldn't get into the apartment. Texts like, "I'm getting pissed," "You better have an excuse," and "You have no idea," all feel like red flags. Could Ellen's relationship have been darker than what it appeared on the outside? This is all speculative on my behalf, but did Sam send these texts so they appeared like he had messaged her in the past? And if he did message her like this before, was their relationship one based on love and trust, or abuse and manipulation? At the end of the day, Ellen Greenberg's case appears to have been fumbled from the get-go. The police came to a conclusion far too early, and evidence wasn't collected that should have been. They allowed the crime scene and evidence to be tampered with before the autopsy had even been performed. As far as I'm concerned, Ellen Greenberg was failed right off the bat. On one hand, you could view it as terrible police work, and that they did all they could to make the case fit the original narrative and conclusion they had come up with. But at worst, there was a cover-up in this case. Now, I myself enjoy a good conspiracy theory, but most of the time the truth is very simple. But in this case, I think it's easier to say that a potential cover-up is what may have actually occurred. It wouldn't be the first, nor the last time something like that has been done. In conclusion, I think Ellen's case should be reopened by the police department and properly investigated to its fullest extent. There's too much potential evidence and findings that point to someone else committing this crime, not Ellen herself. I sympathize with Ellen's family, as they have spent years trying to fight for justice for their daughter, and they have been stopped every step of the way. In 2024, a positive update did occur in this case, as the Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed to take Ellen's case on. They will now hear arguments from Ellen's family as to why the case should be reopened and re-investigated. I just hope the Supreme Court does the right thing so justice can finally be had for Ellen Greenberg. Now, I ask you all what your thoughts are on this case. Do you believe the police's original findings that Ellen did this all to herself? Or do you believe someone else took Ellen's life that fateful day in January of 2011? Let me know in the comment section below your thoughts, and please, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, consider hitting that like button and subscribing. I greatly appreciate the support. And as always, my condolences go out to all of Ellen's family and friends. If you want to dive further into this case, a man named Gavin Fish has done an unbelievable job of compiling all the evidence and painstakingly going into every detail within this case. He has a YouTube channel and a website, gavinfish.com, where you can dive into this case even further if you would like. I highly recommend it. Thomas Messick Sr. was an 82-year-old former U.S. Army paratrooper, hunter, and survival expert. In November of 2015, Tom and 6 friends and family members would embark on a hunting trip, which would take them to Lily Pond. Lily Pond is an area located just east of Brant Lake, which is part of a hamlet in the town of Horicon, New York in Warren County. That is where Thomas Messick would vanish without so much as a trace. What happened to Thomas Messick? Why has not a single trace of him been found in the 8 years since he went missing? In today's episode, we're going to dive into this extremely baffling case. For me, this is another one that hits close to home. My mother lives just outside of Troy, New York, the city where Thomas Messick was living at the time of his disappearance. With the 8-year anniversary taking place this past November, I thought it was as good a time as ever to dive down the rabbit hole that is the disappearance of Thomas Messick. Thomas Messick Sr. was born March 14, 1933, in Troy, New York. After graduating from high school, Thomas would join the Army, where he would go on to be a paratrooper. Following his time in the Army, Thomas would take his skills and apply them to hunting and survival training. Thomas was an avid outdoorsman, and he had a passion for teaching others how to be better equipped before heading out into the wilderness. Being a survival expert himself, he would go on to teach survival training courses for many years. Thomas was an avid hunter. He would start a tradition some 55 years earlier of taking an annual hunting trip with friends and family members. Typically, the men would all hunt at a shared hunting camp, which was located in Hague, New York. Hague is a town in northeastern Warren County, New York, located on the scenic Lake George. If you take a look at the map, you will see that Hague, New York is located roughly 12.8 miles from Lily Pond. According to reports, the men headed up to the camp, and on November 15, 2015, they decided to travel to Lily Pond to do a few hours of hunting. The plan at that point was to have the older men in the group set up in a line. The idea was that the older men in the group would have an easier time if they were all in an area where they could stay put. So 4 of the men, including Tom, set up in a line along the access road near Lily Pond. They would put around 100 yards or so in between each other and travel 40 to 50 yards off the road and find a spot to sit and wait. Tom's wife stated in an interview that if Tom was a watcher, he would have stayed put and watched. The younger men in the group would then travel around into the opposite side of a hill. The goal was to have the younger men drive any potential deer that they found back into the direction where the older men were sitting, waiting, with rifles ready. By around 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon, the men would all meet back up at the pre-planned meeting spot. The men would soon come to a realization that Tom was nowhere to be found. Now, to give more insight into this case, each member of the party had a walkie-talkie on them. Knowing that if Tom had been in trouble, he would have called over the walkie-talkie, the group didn't immediately panic. They hiked together to the spot where Tom had been left, but when they arrived, they were baffled at what they found. Nothing. No sign of Thomas was present in the spot he had been left just a handful of hours before. His gun, his gear, and Tom himself had all seemingly just vanished. By 4:30 p.m., the group called in forest rangers to assist in searching for Tom. It would get dark by around 7 p.m. that evening. At that point, half the group would stay near the car, honking the horn and firing their rifles in order to try and alert Tom to their position. The rest of the men would leave the scene, and that's when Tom was reported missing to authorities. Now, in this region in November, it can get pretty cold at night. Tom was equipped in wearing his duck boots, camouflage pants and coat, a pair of gloves, and a red and black checkered hat. He was also carrying his rifle and a walkie-talkie. To add to the bizarre nature of it all, Tom never reached out on the walkie-talkie, nor did he ever respond to any requests from the group. By the following morning, Tom's friends and family were getting more and more worried, but they still had faith that Tom would be found. Given Tom's extensive survival training, if anyone could survive a night out in the woods, even at age 82, it would be Tom. The search would start on November 16th with 13 trained SAR professionals from the Park Service. To put it as simple as I can, the search for Tom was very well organized from the beginning. This was not a case where the ball was dropped from the get-go. No, Tom's search was underway and extremely thorough. Over the next several days and weeks, more than 300 professionals and volunteers were assisting on a daily basis. Dogs, divers, and helicopters would scour the area. Day 2 would begin, and it would prove to be a tough one, as weather would roll in and the rain would make things very difficult on all those involved in the search. The State Police Aviation Unit would also search a large area by air with the aid of a helicopter. From all reports, the searchers covered numerous miles of ground standing shoulder to shoulder, but as the days continued on, not a single trace of Tom would be found. Now, many have discussed how the rain could have destroyed and washed away possible evidence, but from what I found in all the reporting, sniffer dogs were brought in prior to the rain getting bad. All I could find in regards to the dogs was that they did in fact locate a hit on Tom, but that they subsequently would lose it rather quickly. I've also seen some reports that the dogs never found anything, so it's unclear where the truth lies in this matter. Either way, it was almost like he was there 1 second and just vanished the next. On day 4 of the search for Tom, a couple of FBI tactical officers would arrive on scene. Now, for some of you this may not sound odd, but it's a weird moment in this case, as the FBI does not get involved in adult cases of missing persons, unless a crime is believed to have taken place. But from all reports, foul play has never been suspected in this case. So why was the FBI there? And why did they show up as quickly as they did? Now, we could dive real deep into the rabbit hole, as some people believe the presence of the FBI is a sign of something more sinister transpiring within the woods throughout the United States. Whether there is any truth to it, I truly don't know. For the sake of trying to remain as impartial as possible with my reporting of the case, I will simply say that I don't know why they chose to show up for this case in particular. But if you'd like to dive a little deeper into the conspiracy surrounding this case and others, then I would highly recommend you watch the Missing 411, The Hunted documentary. They dive into this case and a handful of others, and I will say I enjoyed the film. I'm not one to typically lose myself down the rabbit hole, but it is interesting to think and wonder if there could be something more sinister lurking within the vast forests across the globe. By Thanksgiving Day, the full-scale search was called off for Tom Messick. More small searches would take place over the next few months and into January, but not a single piece of evidence was ever found, and to this very day, nothing has ever been recovered. We'll now take the time to dive into some theories surrounding this baffling case. As always, whenever I dive into a case like this, I like to follow Occam's razor. The simplest answer is usually the correct one. Now, does that mean that the more outlandish theories and ideas are all completely bogus? No, not at all. We have nothing to go on at this point, so all we can do is speculate and talk about what potentially transpired. So I will start things off with the easiest theory. He wandered off and succumbed to the elements. Now, Tom was a survival expert, but he was also 82 years old. He was blind in one eye and mostly deaf in one ear. Is there a chance he could have wandered off and died? It's possible. He could have fallen and hit his head. He could have suffered a heart attack or a stroke of some kind. But that leaves the question of where is the body and all of his belongings. Now, Tom was wearing a bunch of camouflage. This inherently makes it more difficult to locate his body, and maybe he was just missed in all of the searches. This has happened in numerous other cases, and would it really be a surprise if Tom's body was one day located somewhere within the areas that were already searched? Now, given all the info we have, I believe this is 100% possible, but for me it just doesn't feel likely. Tom had a walkie-talkie. Why wasn't it ever used to call for help? Tom was an expert, and he would have known what to do if he got lost or injured. I feel that given how thorough the search was, how experienced Tom was, and the fact that his walkie-talkie was never used to call for any kind of help, something more sinister had to have transpired within this case. So that brings us to foul play. Now, there are a few theories in regards to foul play, Some believe that Tom was accidentally killed and his murder was covered up. Some believe that he may have been abducted from the area and killed and buried somewhere else, while some believe that he was never in the woods in the first place. Now, the idea that he was never in the woods in the first place stems from some reports from searchers and locals living in the area. Some believe that because of how thorough the search was and the fact that nothing was ever discovered, that means he just wasn't there. Now, that could be the case, but what's the motive behind any of it? Some have pointed fingers at the family, but I just don't see it being what happened. You also have to take into consideration that if he wasn't there at all, then all those that were on that hunting trip. You also have to take into consideration that if he wasn't there at all, then all of those that were on that hunting trip would have had to keep their mouths shut for the last 8 years. On top of that, all of them would have had to have agreed that staging a hunting disappearance was the best course of action. I'm a believer that a secret as big as that is hard enough to be kept quiet by a couple of people, let alone an entire group of people, including relatives like Tom's own son. After watching numerous stories on this case and digging into all the details out there, I just don't believe the family is lying in the story that they're telling. If the family truly wanted to stage a hunting trip gone wrong, they could have done it a lot better. As a matter of fact, if they wanted to make it all more believable, they would have left some evidence behind to show that Tom was indeed there in the woods with them on that day. The lack of proof of Tom even being there leads me to believe that this wasn't staged. Also, Tom's medication and some of his belongings were found back at their camp. Based on interviews with his son, his wife, and his friends, I just don't see them all being on board with some big cover-up in the death of Tom. It seems like they all truly cared for him, and they're just as baffled about what happened. Could he have been killed in a hunting accident and those around him panicked and disposed of his body and possessions? This is another possibility, but based on everything that transpired, it just doesn't seem right. For instance, if that did go down, then why would members of the hunting trip agree to be featured in a documentary film like Missing 411? If I was involved in a situation like that, the last thing I would want is to do more interviews and potentially give away information that contradicts information that was already given. Also, my same logic applies that keeping a secret like that amongst numerous people is not easy. You would think that someone would have cracked or slipped up some info to someone by now. There's also the simple fact of why. If an accident occurred, why hide it or cover it up? For me, it just doesn't feel plausible. Now, that leads me to abduction. Could Tom have been killed or abducted by someone that he ran into in the woods? Now, this theory I think has a little bit more credibility. Given Tom's age and the fact that he's partially blind and deaf, I could see someone sneaking up on him. Now, what reason would someone have to do this? That I don't know. Maybe a local didn't like seeing a group like this hunt within the area. Maybe someone confronted Tom about the manner in which they were hunting, and it led to an exchange that got violent and left Tom dead. One piece of information that was shared by those within the hunting group has sparked a lot of debate. It was reported that a sound was heard that couldn't be placed. It was described as the sound of a metal trap of some sort slamming shut. Now, some have pointed to the idea that maybe this was a vehicle door, or maybe the tailgate on a pickup truck being slammed shut. But from the Missing 411 documentary, it was reported that this sound transpired over near the hill and not in the direction of where Tom was stationed. The only thing that gives me pause from this idea is the fact that from all reports, Tom had someone only 100 or so yards from him during the hunting trip. So how could someone abduct Tom and get away with little to no notice? Now, I watched a video about this case that was done by the Lore Lodge. Within the video, they traveled to the area relatively close to where Tom went missing. They tested the idea of being 100 or so yards away and the fact that you could still very clearly hear what was being said. You also need to take into account that they ran this test during the summer months when the trees are full of leaves and sound is even more muddled by this fact. Now, in November, when Tom went missing, sound would have traveled even more clearly with the trees being all but barren at that time of the year. So it continues to beg the question, how could someone abduct Tom without being noticed? The only logical conclusion that I can come to is that perhaps Tom didn't stay put where he was. There's a 4 to 5 hour period where Tom could have wandered off. Now Tom could not have wandered off too far on his own, but 4 to 5 hours could have given him enough time to wander to a point where he came upon someone with bad intentions. This person could have made Tom give up his gun and walkie-talkie. This person could have then simply walked Tom out of the woods at gunpoint into a vehicle that was far enough away, and then taken Tom with little to no notice. Perhaps that sound that was heard was the only sound made during Tom's abduction. I would say that based on all the facts that we have, and the fact that not a trace of Tom has ever been found, this could potentially be a logical answer as to what happened to Tom Messick. I would say that in all of this, the two most logical ideas would be that Tom ran into someone with bad intentions, or that Tom simply wandered off a bit and died somehow, and his body just hasn't been recovered as of yet. But there are some other ideas floating around out there, including the idea that something else was in the woods with the men on that day. It was reported by the hunting party that the woods seemed absolutely dead on November 15th of 2015, while searchers would go on to report the same thing during the first few days of looking for Tom. No birds, squirrels, deer, or any animal of any kind could be heard. This was odd enough that numerous people felt the need to share this info and point out how bizarre it felt. So the question becomes, what was out there in the woods? Now, according to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization's report, there have been 13 reports within Warren County of potential Bigfoot sightings. These date back from the spring of 1990 to August of 2018. The neighboring Washington County has 11 reports, while Essex County, which is farther north, has a total of 9 reported sightings. That's a total of 33 sightings within 3 closely connected counties with vast amounts of wilderness. Now, Whitehall, New York is roughly an hour away from Brant Lake. Why do I bring that up? Well, there's a documentary titled The Beast of Whitehall. In it, they dive into numerous reported Bigfoot sightings that took place in 1976 within the Whitehall region. These sightings are not just of normal everyday civilians either. There were numerous law enforcement officers who also reported seeing something that, when described, sounds like it could have been the ever-elusive Bigfoot. Now, do I ultimately believe in Bigfoot or Sasquatch? I can't say that I outright do, but do I believe that there could be something strange happening in the dense, untamed forests throughout the world? I can't argue the fact that people have seen the unexplained. Whether it's Bigfoot or the Wendigo, there have been stories and reported sightings of creatures that lurk and hunt within the woods that span hundreds of years. Do I believe something like this got Tom? I can't ultimately say I can rule it out. The logical side of my brain says that there is a far more simple answer as to what happened to Thomas Messick, but the details surrounding Tom's case are baffling. If all the information we have been given from the hunting party is accurate, then Tom shouldn't have been able to disappear, let alone disappear without a trace. Now, I would love to know what each and every one of you think, so please take the time to leave a comment below and share your thoughts on this story. Also, if you have any similar stories or cases you think I should check out, you can shoot me an email using the link located in the description box below. Today's story takes us to Warren, Massachusetts. Warren is a town in Worcester County, Massachusetts. The town is located around an hour and 20 minutes west of Boston. The overall population of Warren is listed as being just shy of 5,000 residents. The small town offers a peaceful and relatively crime-free living for the many families that choose to reside there. But in the summer of 2000, the quiet, peaceful community would be plunged into turmoil. Molly Bish was only 16 years old when she started working as a lifeguard at Coleman's Pond in Warren, Massachusetts. On her 7th day of working, Molly's mother would drive her to the pond like she had done many days prior. It was around 10 a.m., and the pair would soon say their goodbyes, and Molly's mother would watch her head off towards the lifeguard station. Around 13 minutes later, swimmers would start arriving at the lake. They found Molly's chair, her sandals, her lunch bag, her first aid kit, and her two-way police radio. It appeared at first that Molly had just abandoned her post, but soon it would become very clear that something more nefarious had taken place on that beach, as 16-year-old Molly Bish would never be seen alive again. This is the Molly Bish story. Molly Bish was born on August 2, 1983. Her family had originally lived in Detroit, Michigan, but due to growing crime rates, Molly's family decided they needed to move and find a safer place to raise their children. The family would move to the quiet and quaint town of Warren, Massachusetts. Now, I have seen some differing reports. One report stated that Molly was born and lived her entire life in Warren, while I also found another report that stated that Molly was around a year old when the family decided to leave Detroit. Either way, Molly spent almost her entire life within Warren, Massachusetts. Molly's father would work as a police officer, and her mother would stay at home raising their kids. Molly was the youngest of the three children. She had an older brother and sister named John Jr. and Heather. Growing up, Molly was said to have been a positive, funny, and uplifting young woman. In high school, Molly had numerous friends, and it's said that she was a kind, caring person who was always making those around her laugh. Molly was a talented athlete and academic. She was an honor student who hoped to one day work with children. While she wasn't studying, she was typically playing soccer, basketball, or softball, soccer being her absolute favorite sport to play. It's easy to say that life was going great for the teenager. She had lots of friends, was doing well in school and with sports, and she had just recently gone to prom with her new boyfriend. As her junior year came to a close and summer began, Molly was looking to get a job and earn money so she could go shopping and do things with her friends. Molly's older brother had been a lifeguard at Coleman's Pond for a few years and was able to put in a good word for his sister. This resulted in Molly obtaining the lifeguard position, and she was excited that she would be able to enjoy the summer on the beach while getting paid for it at the same time. Before Molly began her new job, her brother would show her all the ins and outs of what to do and where to set up at Coleman's Pond. From all reports, Molly's first week on duty went well, and she was truly enthusiastic with her lifeguard duties. And that now brings us to the day that Molly disappeared. As I said in the opener, it was Molly's 7th day of work. It was Tuesday, June 27th, 2000. Prior to heading to work, Molly and her mother would stop at the local police station to pick up her two-way police radio. They then proceeded to the pond, arriving at around 10 a.m. Molly said goodbye to her mother and proceeded to go set up at her lifeguard station. Minutes later, swimmers arrived for their morning lessons. One parent noticed Molly was missing and proceeded to take over the lifeguard duties. That parent would also radio in to Molly's boss, and initially, it was presumed that Molly had simply abandoned her post. It was believed that the teenager may have just run off with some friends, as it was the summer. Per policy, Molly's boss would contact the local police department. They too came to the same conclusion, just presuming that Molly had run off with some friends. At the time, they all believed that she would return for her stuff later in the day. But as my mother always told me, when you assume, well, you make an ass out of you and me. Or in this case, you allow a potential crime scene to get completely trampled all over for an entire day before finally starting to take things serious. As we see in a lot of true crime cases, the ball was seemingly dropped right from the get-go. At around 1 p.m. that afternoon, Molly had still not returned, and the police would finally contact her parents. I don't normally throw my opinions in while telling the story, but no way 3 hours should have passed before her parents were contacted. From all reports, Molly was an extremely responsible teenager. In this case, she should have been treated as such, and things should have been looked into far sooner. When the police contacted Molly's mother, she was immediately alarmed and didn't agree with the police's initial thoughts that Molly had just abandoned her post. Molly's mother would jump into action herself, contacting her friends and her boyfriend, but no one had seen Molly. Molly's mother would drive back over to the pond to investigate, and when she saw her daughter's things that were left behind, well, she immediately knew something was very wrong. She contacted the police again, and after some back and forth, she was finally able to get them to come out and take her daughter's case seriously. When the police arrived at the pond, they observed Molly's belongings and soon came to the conclusion that she may have drowned. The pond would soon be searched, but no sign of Molly was located. From there, the police had no choice but to start considering that maybe Molly had been abducted. But who could have taken her? And how did they do it in such a short window of time? As police continued their search for Molly, her mother soon had a terrifying realization. She may know who took her daughter. It was June 26, 2000, the day before Molly Bish vanished. Molly and her mother would pull into the parking lot to drop her off at the lifeguard post. There in the parking lot sat a white car. Inside the car, there was a man with dark hair and a thick mustache. He was just sitting there, smoking a cigarette. As Molly got out of the car and walked to the pond, her mother noticed that the man was watching her daughter's every move, staring at her intently as he took another long drag on his smoke. The man being there made her extremely uncomfortable, so she hopped out of her car and proceeded to go and help Molly set up at her lifeguard station. As she returned to her car, she figured the man would be gone by now, but he was still sitting there in his car. Molly's mother soon hopped into her car, but she still felt very uneasy leaving her daughter alone at the pond with this man lurking in the parking lot. So she sat there in her car, waiting for the man to leave, and it appears he eventually got the hint as he soon drove off and left the area. Molly's mother felt some relief at the time, but with Molly now missing, this memory soon flooded back to her, leaving her to wonder if she saw the very man who took her daughter. The police were soon notified of this incident, and a sketch artist would be brought in. I will now display a picture of that sketch for you all to see. With the police now realizing that they not only have a missing persons case, but a potential abduction, they soon brought in the state police to assist. As I said before, Warren is a small town, and they simply weren't equipped to handle what this case was turning into. With the state police now involved, the sketch of the man smoking a cigarette was soon released to the public. Tips would begin flooding in, including some people who claimed that they saw the white car in the area around the pond on the day that Molly went missing. The police would follow up on all the tips, but they were unable to locate or pinpoint a potential suspect in the case. Weeks would soon go by with no sign of Molly. Her family remained hopeful she would be found. But as we all know, the more time that goes by in cases like this, the lower the chances are that you will find your loved one still alive. Police would soon make the decision to look a little bit closer at the people around Molly Bish, in particular her boyfriend Steve. The pair had not been together long, but police found it odd that her boyfriend had not been overly cooperative, to the point where it said that he didn't help in the searches for her. Police felt this was weird to say the least, but Molly's family were quick to come out and defend Steve. Steve would eventually go to the police station and volunteer to take a polygraph test. The results would show that he was not lying, and police would rule him out as a suspect in the case. Soon, those weeks would turn to months, and the police would up their search efforts in the case. In fact, the search for Molly Bish would end up becoming the largest and most expensive search for a missing person ever undertaken in the great state of Massachusetts. Molly's case was all over TV and the news, and it was even featured on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. The area around the pond was searched extensively with volunteers and canines, but not a single piece of evidence was ever located. It was as if Molly had simply vanished into thin air. As more time passed, soon those months turned into a year, and a year would turn into 3. Molly was still missing, and it felt like the police weren't any closer to finding answers in her case. That was until May 8th, 2003. A hunter in the nearby city of Palmer, Massachusetts, had seen a piece of blue bathing suit out in the woods while he was hunting. He didn't originally think much of it, but the information was eventually relayed to the police. An alarming piece of information, as Molly Bish was last seen wearing a blue bathing suit. The police would swiftly take action and began searching the woods in the area where the hunter said he saw the bathing suit. And within only a couple days of searching, the police would locate the blue bathing suit within the woods. With the bathing suit located, the police soon sent it out to a lab for DNA testing. While they waited for results, they continued to search the wooded area where it was found. Eventually, results would come in, and it was conclusive. This was Molly Bish's bathing suit. The police were confident now that they were on the right track, and the search of the woods would continue on for weeks. On June 9, 2003, the remains of Molly Bish were finally located within the woods of Palmer, Massachusetts, only a handful of miles away from where she went missing. For 3 years, the family had remained hopeful that maybe, just maybe, one day they would bring their child home, and those hopes were now crushed into a million pieces. Due to the extreme rate of decomposition, Molly's cause of death was impossible to unravel. Nonetheless, it was ultimately determined that her death was due to homicide. The Molly Bish missing persons case was now being shifted into a homicide investigation, the primary suspect still being that man with the mustache and cigarette. It has now been 24 years since Molly Bish went missing, and in that time, the police have investigated countless leads, but no arrests have ever been made in the case. One positive that has come about in this case more recently is the fact that police have officially named someone as a suspect. That someone is convicted rapist Frank Sumner, who passed away back in 2016. But in 2021, he was officially named a suspect within the case. If you view his picture, you can see an eerie resemblance to the man that was sitting in the car with the cigarette. According to the Worcester County District Attorney Joe Early, there's a lot of evidence that leads to Frank Sumner. That's why we first named him a person of interest and then a suspect. We are not stopping. We are going to do everything we can to make sure that this case gets closed out. According to my research, there are 267 pieces of physical evidence within this case, and investigators have received more than 6,700 leads and tips throughout the decades. Right now, the police are going back through all the pieces of evidence they have accumulated within the case. Their hope is that new technology will help them discover DNA evidence that can be linked to the person that took Molly's life. If Frank Sumner did do it, it's tragic that he can't be held accountable, although some may say that his passing in 2016 was karma doing what it needed to reset the scales. After looking at this case, I have only one theory. I believe whoever took Molly had it all planned out. They were potentially watching her for numerous days, seeing her routine, knowing when people show up at the pond. They knew there could be a brief moment in the morning where she would be alone. I think whoever did this did it by taking advantage of Molly's helpful and giving nature. Based on the fact that her first aid kit was left open, I'm led to believe that someone came up to her in a hurry, claiming to either be injured or that someone else was injured. In the heat of the moment, I think Molly opened up her first aid kit, potentially grabbing some items from it and proceeding away from the pond with the person. From there, they could have snatched her at any opportune moment. Perhaps they lured her near their vehicle, perhaps they lured her near the woods. Either way, they were very quick and very slick in how they managed to get their hands on her. Molly was 16, she was a lifeguard, and her job was to watch, protect, and help those in need at the pond. Some despicable human being saw her and decided she was the perfect mark. Molly Bish was a beacon of bright light, a talented, smart, caring, and hardworking young woman that was preyed on by an absolute dredge of the society we live in. So please, hold your kids close. Teach them to be a good person like Molly Bish, but also teach them to be aware of the darkness that can lurk within any town, village, city, or community. You may live in a safe, beautiful, quiet town, but you can never truly know if that person next door to you is harboring a monster deep within. I want to send my deepest condolences to all of Molly Bish's family and friends. Also, if you have any information as to what happened to Molly Bish, please reach out to the Warren, Massachusetts Police Department. Jennifer Kesse had it all. At only 24 years old, Jennifer had a lucrative job, a loving boyfriend, numerous friends, and she had just purchased her first home. Life seemingly couldn't get any better. But on the morning of January 24th, 2006, Jennifer never shows up for work. Her car would eventually be found abandoned about a mile from her home, and security camera footage would record a mysterious man parking and exiting the vehicle. Who is this person, and where is Jennifer Kesse? This is True Crime Stories, The Disappearance of Jennifer Kesse. Jennifer Kesse was born on May 20th, 1981 in New Jersey. Jennifer's parents, Drew and Joyce, would eventually relocate to Tampa, Florida, where Jennifer spent the large majority of her life. Jennifer would attend and eventually graduate from Gaither High School in the mid-90s. Following high school, she would enroll at the University of Central Florida, where she would study finance, graduating with honors in 2003. Jennifer was dedicated, smart, and hardworking. These traits, in conjunction with her college studies, would help Jennifer land a job as a finance manager for Central Florida Investments timeshare company. Jennifer loved her job and proved to be quite the asset to the company. It wouldn't be long before Jennifer's hard work was rewarded with numerous promotions. These promotions, in turn, helped Jennifer invest in her very own place. At only 24 years old, Jennifer was able to purchase a condo at Mosaic at Millenia Condos in Orlando, Florida. From all reports, Jennifer chose this condo due to it being located within a gated community with security. Jennifer was said to be very aware of her surroundings and overall safety, so when she purchased this condo, she felt confident she was making a good decision. She had no idea that this choice would come back to inevitably haunt her. With a little backstory now out of the way, we will jump ahead to January of 2006. Jennifer and her boyfriend of over a year, Rob Ellen, took a trip together to St. Croix. From all reports, the pair had an amazing time together, relaxing and enjoying the beautiful sun and sand of the Caribbean. Following their little vacation together, the pair returned to Florida on Sunday, January 22nd. Jennifer would spend the night at Rob's place in Fort Lauderdale, around 3 hours southeast of Orlando, where Jennifer currently resided. The following morning, Monday, January 23rd, Jennifer would make her way into work. From all reports, the day would go about as normal as can be. Soon, 6 p.m. rolled around, and Jennifer began making her way home. It's around this time that Jennifer would call her parents. Jennifer was still on cloud nine from her trip to the Caribbean and couldn't wait to share all the details with her mother. Jennifer would eventually arrive home and settle in for the night, and at around 10 p.m., Jennifer would call her boyfriend Rob. The pair would talk for a bit, with the conversation taking a turn for the worst. From what Rob has said, the long-distance nature of their relationship was taking a toll on the both of them. The vacation they had just gone on was much needed, but at the same time, Jennifer was unhappy with their long-distance situation. The pair living 3 hours apart made it hard for them to see each other outside of the weekends. The call would soon reach its conclusion, and Jennifer would get ready for bed. For Rob, this final phone call would end up haunting him, as he had no idea that this was the last time he would ever hear Jennifer's voice again. The following morning, January 24th, 2006, at around 8 a.m., Rob calls Jennifer. The phone rings, but she never picks up, and it goes to voicemail. This was uncharacteristic for Jennifer, as she usually spoke to Rob on her way to work every morning. Rob would try calling a few more times, but he was unable to reach her. As the morning progressed, Jennifer never shows up at work. Those that work with Jennifer immediately become concerned. After trying Jennifer's cell phone numerous times, they immediately phone Jennifer's parents. Drew and Joyce are immediately concerned about their daughter. It's unlike her to not be reachable. They continue to call her cell phone, but Jennifer isn't answering. Not knowing what else to do, Jennifer's parents climb into their car and start making the trip from Tampa to Orlando, Florida. On their way, they reach out to Rob, who also expressed concern, as he too had not heard from Jennifer all morning. At around 3 p.m. that afternoon, Jennifer's parents arrive at her condo. From first glance, nothing seems to be out of the ordinary. The condo is clean and tidy, and nothing is out of place. From what her parents have stated, it looked like Jennifer got back from her trip, dropped her bag, and went to work. As Jennifer's apartment is being looked over, it was found that her bathroom appeared to have been used that morning. There was makeup out on the counter, along with a curling iron, wet towels, and a wet shower. all signs indicating that Jennifer had gotten up that morning, showered, gotten ready for work, and had all intentions of going to work. Jennifer's keys, purse, and cell phone were all missing from her condo. Her car was also nowhere to be found. Everything at the scene pointed to Jennifer getting up that morning, getting ready, and heading to work, but as we know, Jennifer never made it to work. So what in the world happened to Jennifer Kesse? With no sign of Jennifer to be found, Jennifer's family went straight to the police department. But as we see, with far too many cases, the police weren't overly cooperative right off the bat. Jennifer was a grown adult who had the right to disappear after all. And to be honest, every time I hear that the police are hesitant to start a missing persons search, my blood boils a little bit more. Those early hours in any case are crucial, and far too often the search for someone is delayed for far too long. Luckily, the Kesse family don't give up easily. They continued to push the police, and by around 7 p.m. that evening, a detective from the police department is finally sent out to start an investigation. In the beginning, the police pursued a theory that Jennifer went missing the night before. When they first analyzed the cell phone data, they were certain that Jennifer had been out and about overnight. And this theory was disputed by Jennifer's parents, who were adamant that their daughter would not have gone out that late when she had work the next morning. Eventually, the police would determine that their initial analysis of the phone data was incorrect. Jennifer's phone did indeed place her inside her apartment the night of January 23rd. As detectives continued their investigation, Jennifer's friends and family would dedicate those first few days posting flyers and bringing as much attention as they could to Jennifer's case. They knew how important those first 48 hours truly are. In the end, the family did an unbelievable job of getting Jennifer's name and face out into the public. Everywhere you went, you'd find numerous posters with Jennifer's face on them. The community at large would soon pitch in, as numerous volunteers helped comb the area around her apartment and beyond. You could say that the community really showed up and came together for Jennifer Kesse. As police and volunteers continued their efforts, a massive discovery would be made on day 2 of the search. Jennifer Kesse's car had been located around a mile away from Jennifer's condo in an area that Jennifer was not known to frequent. This area was also notorious for being a spot where stolen cars would be dumped. When the car was first found, everyone's worst fear was that Jennifer would be found dead in the trunk. When the police finally popped open the trunk, it was found to be completely empty. Jennifer was still out there, and now it was time for the police to analyze the car and see what evidence may have been left behind. Now, early on in the case, there was a reported tip that someone thought they saw Jennifer's car driving around erratically around the time of her disappearance. And this led to the theory that Jennifer may have been in some sort of a struggle within her vehicle. But as police analyzed the car, they found no evidence that a struggle ever took place. The car seemed in order, with no signs of foul play. Inside, they found her cell phone charger, a pair of sandals, and a pair of shoes. Nothing else was found within the vehicle, which ultimately led to more questions than answers. As police continued to look for clues, it wouldn't be long before another massive discovery was made. This discovery appeared, at first, to be the smoking gun that would blow this case wide open. There was video evidence recovered of someone driving and parking Jennifer's car at around noon on the day she went missing. We will take a look at the video now and discuss further.
This is the camera that caught the person that parked Jennifer's vehicle here. Apparently this video, when it films, captures every 2 to 3 seconds as it's filming, so that's why you only see the subject on one side of the gate and then the opposite side of the gate, and he's blocked by the posts on either side of the gate.
So as you can see, the biggest problem with this footage is the technology that was used back in 2006. This particular camera did not record a constant video. It was designed to record about every 2 seconds or so. The most unlucky part of all this is that the person's face is blocked by the fence every time the camera captures him. The chances of this happening the way it did seem so small, but sadly, it is what happened, and without being able to see a clear image of this person's face, the police were left with little to work with. For many, this is the most frustrating aspect of this entire case, as this person was caught dead to rights on camera, and if things had worked out just slightly different, then maybe, just maybe, Jennifer Kesse could have been found. Police continued to follow leads and pursue every avenue that they could think of, but soon, days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to months, and the hope of finding Jennifer Kesse alive slowly faded away. During that time, the video footage was analyzed meticulously by the police and FBI, and the only thing they could determine was that this person was roughly 5'3" to 5'5" inches tall. They also believed, based on the way the person walked, that this was a man. Now, most involved in this case believe that Jennifer was abducted leaving her condo in the morning. A lot of work was being done around the complex at the time Jennifer disappeared, and a lot of the workers were undocumented. To add to the frustration of this case, many of those undocumented workers had begun living within the vacant condos. The complex did not keep records on the workers that were staying within the condos, which made it almost impossible to track down anyone after Jennifer disappeared. It was also reported by Jennifer's family that on several occasions, construction workers constantly catcalled, whistled at, and harassed her. Years after Jennifer went missing, some other residents that lived in the condos would finally be brought in for some questioning, with many sharing how uncomfortable they were with all the workers living there on site. One woman even described how she would come home and find her underwear drawer ransacked. She truly believed that some of the workers would enter her condo when she was not home. The theory that one of these workers abducted Jennifer would remain strong over the years, but police were seemingly no closer to finding where Jennifer was or who had taken her away. Soon, an entire decade would pass. For the Kesse family, the nightmare of trying to find their daughter was never given up on. In 2018, with little current work being done on Jennifer's case, the Kesse family made the decision to sue the Orlando Police Department. The family wanted access to their daughter's entire case file, and surprisingly, in 2019, a settlement would be reached, and over 16,000 pages of records were subsequently handed over to the Kesse family. These documents would be analyzed by their private investigator numerous times over. Now, here in 2025, answers are still yet to be had. The private investigator for the Kesse family does have a theory, though. He believes that Jennifer walked out her front door that morning and was blindsided. He believes that she may have been attacked and abducted right then and there. See, there were a handful of workers living and working in the condo across the hall from Jennifer. These individuals, as far as we know, have never been identified. There was also no record kept of them working or living there. With no records, their identities are only known to the very few that worked amongst them back in 2006. Is it possible that Jennifer was abducted and taken into a different condo? I'd say anything is possible in this case. They could have abducted her, taken her into the condo across the way, and dumped her body shortly after. Then one of the workers could have calmly taken her car, driven it up the road, and left it there to steer the case in a different direction. There is also a possibility that Jennifer was abducted as she walked to her car, or before she even got into her car. Perhaps she was grabbed and dragged into a worker's van. As you can see, there's just a lot of possibilities in this case. Sadly, the person that dumped Jennifer's car was smart, as they seemingly wiped down the steering wheel and did a good job of leaving no fingerprints or trace of themselves behind in the car. In the end, this case is a tough one, as there's enough evidence to point to foul play, but that evidence falls just short of telling us who the suspect is. Now, I'd love to hear what each and every one of you think. What do you think happened to Jennifer Kesse? Also, if you or anyone you know has any information about this case, please reach out to the Orlando Police Department or reach out to the Find Jennifer Kesse Facebook page. It has now been 19 years since Jennifer went missing. Her family deserves answers, and it's going to take someone finally speaking up for those answers to be found. As always, my deepest condolences go out to all of Jennifer Kesse's family and friends. It was October 1970. Donna Dahl was a 21-year-old college student at Northern Illinois University. Northern Illinois University is a public research university that is located in DeKalb, Illinois. Donna was studying Russian and attending the school on a scholarship. Her ultimate goal was to one day become a teacher. That was her dream. But those dreams would turn into a nightmare. While attending school, Donna also worked part-time at the Swen Parson Library, which was located on campus. Donna was living off campus at the time in a rooming house located along the West Lincoln Highway. For those that don't know, a rooming house is a multi-tenant house where the different bedrooms are rented out. Typically, in scenarios like this, the tenants will share a kitchen and potentially bathrooms. Diving deeper into Donna's personal life, it was reported that she had recently broken up with her boyfriend, Charles Burke, who was a math student. According to reports from friends of Donna, Charles was controlling and extremely possessive. Donna was not happy in this relationship, and during the summer of 1970, Donna attended a foreign language program in Pennsylvania. While attending, she met another man who she became involved with. This led to her breaking things off with Charles. Now, in researching the case, I found some reports that the man that she met in Pennsylvania was still married, while some reports stated he was recently separated from his wife. No matter where the truth lies, Donna really liked this man and found him to be the polar opposite of Charles. Nonetheless, Charles was absolutely devastated when Donna broke up with him. That now brings us to Friday, October 2nd, 1970. Donna was working at the library that day and had made plans to hang out with a friend of hers named Donna Charlotte. To avoid confusion, I will refer to Donna's friend as simply Charlotte. Charlotte planned to come by when Donna finished her shift so they could go for a drive and catch up. From all reports, Donna clocked out at 9:59 p.m. at the library. Charlotte showed up to pick Donna up and would proceed to wait around for 20 minutes, but Donna would never show. At the time, she wasn't overly worried. She just figured Donna had something else come up. But Donna would never make it home that night. In fact, Donna would never be seen alive again. According to her roommates, no one was initially worried. They figured Donna had made a trip to Pennsylvania to spend time with her love interest. But once Sunday night rolled around and there was still no sign of Donna, her roommates became worried. The police would eventually be called, and Donna was officially reported missing around 48 hours after she had clocked out of her shift at the library. As the police began their investigation, the first thing they noticed was that Donna had left all her belongings behind in her bedroom. But right off the bat, they didn't seem overly concerned. It wasn't until the next day when she would miss her classes at the university that it would become ever more apparent that something was wrong. It wasn't like Donna to miss her classes. With the police still not taking things overly serious, Donna's friends and family, including her ex-boyfriend Charles, started setting up search parties. But no sign of Donna was found. That was until October 11th, a full 9 days after Donna finished her shift at the library. According to reports, a group of teenagers were heading to a party. Prior to heading to that party, the group wanted to recover some beer that they had hidden in some tall grass along Nelson Road. I did some research and found that Nelson Road was roughly 1.8 miles from the Northern Illinois University campus. As the teenagers arrived and located their beer, they would make a horrifying discovery: the body of a woman. Upon seeing this, the group would immediately leave the scene and go and contact the local police department. When the police arrived on scene, they were able to quickly come to the conclusion that this body was that of Donna Dahl. Ultimately, her ex-boyfriend Charles would be contacted, and he would be the one to positively ID the body. Donna Dahl had finally been located. But what happened to the young, talented woman who had so much life left before her? We will now dive into the evidence in this case. First, diving into what Donna was and wasn't wearing when her body was found. Donna was first and foremost fully clothed, except she wasn't wearing any shoes. On top of that, she was wearing a jacket, but this was not the jacket she had last been seen wearing. Her purse, her shoes, and the trench coat she had last been seen wearing would never be located. Following an autopsy, some more bizarre pieces of information would come to light. It was ultimately determined that Donna's cause of death was due to suffocation, but no fibers of any kind were found within her airways, which is unusual in a death due to suffocation. It was also determined that Donna was still alive for upwards of 48 hours after she had left the library that night. Where did she go during this time? What was she doing? Was she being held against her will? Well, in some of the reports, I found that there was no sign of struggle. This has led many to believe that Donna knew who her murderer was. But it gets even more bizarre than that. During her autopsy, her stomach contents were checked. In her stomach, they found 5 to 6 pounds of potatoes. That's a lot of potatoes. This just opens up so many questions. Was someone force-feeding her potatoes in the 48 hours before her life was extinguished? So now the question becomes, who took the life of Donna Dahl? Well, it wouldn't take police long to focus in on the ex-boyfriend, Charles Burke. The first red flag was the original searches that Charles had been a part of. It was reported that Charles and the group that he was searching with had stopped around a quarter mile before they would have potentially located Donna's body. Another red flag would come once Charles found out he was a prime suspect within the case, as Charles would try to take his own life after finding out. Charles would end up surviving this attempt, and he would soon obtain legal representation. His legal representation would make a statement that Charles was being extremely cooperative with the police, even going as far as offering to take a polygraph test. Whether that test was ever done has never been released to the public. At this point in the story, I wish that I could tell you that the police found more evidence and eventually solved the case. But that's not how things would go. The police would continue to investigate, but as with a lot of cases, days would turn to weeks, weeks to months, and eventually months would turn to years. Donna's case would go cold, and it has been almost 54 years now, and her case still to this very day remains unsolved. With no new leads or suspects, Donna's friends and family have never gotten the closure they deserve. Do I believe that Charles had something to do with her death? Well, I can't rule it out. He was possessive, controlling, and had motive due to Donna breaking up with him. I just hope that one day, Donna's case can be solved and justice can finally be served to whoever the perpetrator was. As always, my deepest condolences go out to all the friends and family of Donna Dahl.
Counter City. Ambulance, police, or fire. Oh my God, all. Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
I don't know, and I just came home, and I found my wife downstairs, and there's blood everywhere.
Are you with her now?
No.
Is she awake? Is she breathing? Is she breathing? I'm sending help. I'm sending someone to assist you.
Amanda Antoni was born on June 5, 1984. She grew up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and was adopted by a loving family at a very young age. Amanda had 2 older brothers growing up who absolutely adored their adopted sister. It's been said that Amanda was an animal lover with a kind heart. Amanda would eventually move out of her foster parents' home, and in her 20s she would meet her eventual husband Lee. The pair would get married in 2009. According to Amanda's husband Lee, the couple were inseparable. Interviews with family and friends would bring forth information about her marriage. It's said that, like many other couples, Amanda and Lee had their problems. One of those marital issues stemmed from Amanda being the breadwinner. She ran her own house cleaning business, while her husband Lee would consistently struggle to hold down a job. The pair lived in a home located in Castle Ridge. Castle Ridge is a residential neighborhood in the northeast quadrant of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The neighborhood where the couple lived had a statistically higher level of crime, with reports that homeless people had, at times, entered their backyard to collect recyclables. With that backstory, let's now dive into the terrifying events that took place in October of 2015. We'll start first with Friday, October 23rd. On this day, the pair had plans to take a 6-hour drive to Saskatchewan. Lee's mother needed help in settling his father's estate, and the pair were heading out for the next handful of days to do so. According to Lee, Amanda suffered at times from migraines. That Friday was no different. With Amanda not feeling well, the decision was made for her to stay home. Lee would inevitably make the 6-hour drive by himself. On Saturday, October 24th, at around 7:06 p.m., Amanda and Lee would start a phone call with one another. At some point during the brief call, Lee would hear the dog start barking. Amanda was then heard yelling at the dog to quiet down. Within mere moments, the phone call would drop, leaving Lee unaware of what just happened. Lee would immediately attempt to call his wife back, but when he called her cell phone, it went straight to voicemail. He tried the house phone as well, but received no answer. Lee then texted his wife. When he didn't receive a text back, he just assumed her battery had died on her phone. He figured he would hear back from her as soon as she got it charged back up and working again. The following day, on Sunday, October 25th, Lee still had not received any kind of response from his wife. He would text her again while he continued helping his mother out with the estate. Monday, October 26th would roll around and still no response from Amanda. Sometime that morning, Lee would get in his car and start the long 6-hour journey back to his house in the Castle Ridge neighborhood. When Lee arrived home, he found the front door of the house locked. He would enter and find Amanda's purse and keys on a table. He then began looking for his wife. He soon found dog urine on the floor and would inspect the animals' dishes, finding that both their food and water was completely empty. He then let his dog Ruby out into the backyard. When Lee was asked about the back door, he did not remember whether or not it had been locked or unlocked at the time. With the dog now outside, Lee would head upstairs in search of his wife. Not finding her there, he soon came back downstairs. Now, according to Lee, Amanda always found the basement of their home to be creepy. She simply didn't like to go down there. But with no sign of his wife anywhere else, Lee would begin taking the stairs down into the basement. He would be greeted with a sight that no husband, hell, no person, should ever have to witness. There, on the floor of the basement, was the lifeless body of Amanda Antoni. The body, as well as the entire area all around the body, was covered in blood. Lee would soon call 911. You heard the call at the beginning of this episode. In that call, you can hear how broken and hysterical Lee was when he found his wife lifeless in the basement. The police would soon arrive on scene, and the investigation into what happened would begin. Police and autopsy reports would eventually be released. In those reports, it was found that Amanda had suffered blunt force trauma to her face, head, back, buttocks, and extremities. She was covered in bruises in all the same places and had a laceration on her face. She had suffered a nasal bone fracture and an orbital bone fracture, but no brain injury took place. Her body was also found with her pants pulled down, but no apparent evidence of an S assault was discovered. Ultimately, Amanda had succumbed due to a massive loss of blood. Now, this next part is unclear, but I read that her death was deemed an accident, and I also saw somewhere that her death was ruled as undetermined. Either way, it's not fully known to this very day what exactly happened to Amanda Antoni. Some more vital information in processing this case would be her time of death, as it was ultimately ruled that she had passed at some point on Saturday, October 24th, between roughly 7 and 7:30 p.m. This means that she passed on right around the same time her phone call abruptly ended with her husband. Police that had reported to the scene would later go on to state that it was the bloodiest crime scene they had ever encountered. Footprints and blood splatter would be analyzed, and the results would indicate that all of the footprints and blood at the scene was Amanda's. There was no sign of anyone else ever being in that basement with her while she bled out. One of the creepiest aspects of this case is the footprints discovered at the very bottom of the stairs. As from looking at the prints, it appears that Amanda had gotten back up at some point and stood at the bottom of the staircase. But why didn't she try to go back up the stairs and get help? Amanda's body was found about 10 feet away from the basement steps. Upstairs within the house, police would discover an overturned chair about 8 feet away from the basement opening. They also discovered Amanda's phone on the floor with the screen broken about 10 feet from the basement opening. Lastly, the police found a piggy bank at the top of the stairs. It was broken, but still together. It appeared to have been struck, and when it was, it caused an imprint into the wall at the top of the basement stairs. Shards from the piggy bank would be found embedded in Amanda's forehead, as well as on the steps and in the basement. Police would speak to neighbors of the couple. It was reported that around the same time of Amanda and Lee's phone call, a neighbor heard a loud dog begin barking. They also heard someone yell at the dog. Another resident in the neighborhood reported seeing someone running away from the area and through a different neighbor's backyard. Whoever this person was has never been determined. There was no signs of forced entry into the house, but as we stated earlier, Lee doesn't remember if the back door of the house was locked or unlocked. So there is the potential that someone could have entered through the back door. So what happened to Amanda Antoni? Well, when the police first began investigating the crime scene, they were led to believe that someone had entered the home and committed a heinous act. But when reports came back showing only Amanda's blood and footprints, the chances that someone else was there seemingly changed, which led to investigators having to look into the theory that this was just a horribly tragic accident. This idea is not a popular one with the family of Amanda, as the gruesome crime scene photos showed blood literally everywhere in the basement. For Amanda's loved ones, well, there's simply too many details that can't be explained away by the idea that she simply fell down the stairs. The overturned chair in the dining room and the broken piggy bank on the ledge, whose fragments were found embedded into her forehead, all lead family to believe something more sinister occurred. There was also an odd thing that took place, as neither the family dog nor either cats ventured down into the basement to be with Amanda during the entire time her body was down there. The most confusing aspect of this case for everyone involved is still the fact that Amanda clearly, at some point, stood up from her fall and made it to the very bottom of the stairs. But not once did she ever attempt to climb back up those stairs. Why wouldn't she attempt the stairs and try to go get some help? As you can see, this is an absolutely puzzling case from top to bottom. If you look at the initial evidence, it seems apparent that someone may have done something to Amanda. But with all the blood splatter and footprints analyzed, well, it paints the opposite picture. What caused the chair to get turned over? What caused Amanda's phone to end up on the floor with the screen broken? What we do know for certain is that Amanda did hit her head at the top of the stairs on the piggy bank that was sitting at the ledge. Evidence proves this enough. She hit her forehead on the piggy bank and toppled down those stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, she would have been bleeding and would have been in pain due to the broken orbital and break in her nose. Now, from the crime scene, it appears a struggle took place, but as we said, zero evidence anyone else was ever down there with her, so we have to believe the struggle was her slipping and sliding around trying to get her bearings. At some point, she does regain a bit of composure, as we can see based on the evidence that she was able to stand up and make it to the bottom of those stairs. But why didn't she attempt to climb up them? Was she simply too disoriented to try? Or was there something at the top of the stairs stopping her, or scaring her into staying inside the basement? Looking at everything, I have two possible ideas for what took place. The first one will be my idea around it being an accident. Perhaps, while Amanda was on the phone, the dog got rowdy. As Amanda yelled at the dog, she may have tripped over the dog in the commotion. This could have led to her falling down, hitting her head on the piggy bank, and rolling down the stairs. The dog, now scared over what happened, could have taken off running. The dog could have knocked over the chair, and perhaps when Amanda tripped, the phone went flying as well. Now, my only issue with this idea is where the phone was located, as both the chair and phone were located around 9 to 10 feet from the basement opening. Is it possible the phone flew that far out of her hands? Perhaps she tripped farther from the stairs than we think, and as she kept trying to catch her balance, she careened towards the basement opening. And thus, what happened. I still don't think this is a foolproof idea, as the question still remains, why didn't she climb those stairs? My second idea is that there was an intruder in the home. Perhaps the dog was barking at someone, and that someone snuck up on Amanda and grabbed her. Maybe the phone and the chair were knocked over, and in the altercation, Amanda gets pushed into the basement opening. Not a perfect theory either, given no evidence of another person was ever found, but this could lead to why Amanda didn't climb the stairs. Maybe the person who broke into the house was at the top of those stairs. Maybe Amanda didn't realize how badly she was bleeding and figured it would stop, so she stood at the bottom of those steps and hoped the person would leave, and inevitably, she lost too much blood. She would grow weak from blood loss and eventually succumb to her injuries. Once again, not a perfect explanation, as why were Amanda's pants pulled down? But I will say, that last explanation is the most terrifying to think about. Now, many have pointed to the husband in this case. The police did verify that he had an alibi for when Amanda lost her life. Also, he seemed to truly be a husband who was broken and shattered from what he came home to. If that's acting, then he deserves an Oscar. My only suspicion of the husband lies in what he didn't do. I know how I am with my wife. I can say that if my wife's phone died, well, things would have been handled differently. I'd give a little bit of time for her to potentially charge a dead phone, but after like 15 minutes tops, I would begin to consider worst-case situations. It would be at that point that I would reach out to a friend, family, neighbor to go and check on my wife. In no way would I allow communication to be non-existent for multiple days. The fact that he didn't do anything to check up on her does make me wonder. Maybe it's just me, but I would love to know what each and every one of you think. So please, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. This is hands down one of the most bizarre, unsolved mysteries I've ever encountered. On that note, I want to take a quick moment, as I always do, to send my sincere condolences to Amanda, to her husband, as well as all her family and friends. On March 2nd, 1998, 19-year-old Suzanne Lyall left her job at Babbage's, which was located within Crossgates Mall. From there, it is believed that she boarded a city bus from the mall in order to get back to her uptown campus at the University at Albany. Once arriving, a classmate claimed to see Suzanne exit the bus and begin the short walk to her dorm room. From all the information gathered, she never made it to her dorm, and she was never seen again. This is the disappearance of Suzanne Lyall. Now, this case is one that I've known about for quite some time. My reason for choosing to cover this case is because I grew up and spent the first 90% of my life in this region of New York. I lived in a small town roughly 25 minutes from where Suzanne went missing. But the school Suzanne went to, and the mall she worked at, are all places that I've spent countless hours of time at over the years. To say I have a lot of knowledge of the Albany, New York region would be an understatement. This was where I called home for a large portion of my life. Now let's go ahead and dive into Suzanne's story. Suzanne was born in Saratoga Springs, New York, on April 6th of 1978. Saratoga Springs is a city in Saratoga County, New York. The name of the city came about because of the mineral springs in the area. Saratoga is a popular resort destination, known for its casino, and is also home to the Saratoga Racecourse, a horse racing track that gets upwards of 1 million visitors every year. Suzanne Lyall was the youngest of 3 children. Suzanne, her siblings, and her parents, Doug and Mary Lyall, lived and grew up in the nearby Ballston Spa area. Ballston Spa is a village located in Saratoga County. It is located just southwest of Saratoga Springs and is considered a part of the Capital Region. The Capital Region is the metropolitan area surrounding Albany, the capital of New York State. Suzanne had a pretty normal early childhood. Early on in life, she showed an interest in computers. It's even said that she built one from scratch. No simple feat in the late 80s and early 90s. Suzanne would go on to attend and eventually graduate from Ballston Spa High School. She graduated with honors in 1996. Taking her talents then to the State University of New York at Oneonta. She would spend 1 year there before transferring to SUNY Albany. Suzanne was someone who was looking for a challenge, and she felt SUNY Albany would give her just that. Another perk to transferring to SUNY Albany was the fact that she could be a lot closer to home and a lot closer to her boyfriend, Richard Condon. Suzanne and Richard had dated in high school, where he was a few years older than Suzanne. Their romance continued on into their young college lives, with both showing a mutual love and interest in computers. On top of going to school full-time, Suzanne was also working 2 jobs. One of her jobs was working for a computer company in Troy, New York. The other job had her working inside Crossgates Mall at a store called Babbage's. For those unaware of what Babbage's is, it was basically GameStop before GameStop came to be. The company sold video game systems, hardware, games, and tons of computer products. It had a very diverse selection for consumers to shop. Being that Suzanne loved computers, this job was right up her alley. If you have to work while going to college, you might as well work and do something you enjoy. Now this brings us to March 2nd, 1998. This particular day had Suzanne stressed out, as she had a midterm exam that she had to do well on. She got up and got ready and went to take the exam. Following the exam, she went about the rest of her day and completed all of her classes by around 4 p.m. Following her day in the classroom, Suzanne would travel to Babbage's to work a shift until 9 p.m. that evening. Following her work shift, she would proceed to board the public bus in order to get a ride back to her dorm room. Now, to give a little more context to the overall story, Babbage's, within Crossgates Mall, was located roughly 2 miles or 3.2 kilometers west of Suzanne's college campus. I found within the reporting that the bus driver did in fact confirm that she was on that bus. But the bus driver could not confirm where she got off. All he stated was that she wasn't on the bus at the end of his night. For the sake of moving things forward, we will presume, for now, that Suzanne got off at the typical stop she normally would get off at. This stop would bring her within a relatively short walk to her dorm room. Another report was given to the police from a friend of Suzanne's. This friend stated that she saw Suzanne at around 9:45 p.m. According to the friend, she exited the bus near campus and began walking towards her dorm. But sadly, Suzanne would never reach her dorm on that fateful night in March of 1998. So what happened to Suzanne Lyall? Now, in a lot of cases, we see days go by before someone is reported missing. One positive in Suzanne's case is the fact that she was reported missing the next day. The downside of it all was that campus security didn't take the report seriously. Her boyfriend Richard Condon phoned Suzanne's parents to tell them that she had not made it back to her dorm room. According to Richard, Suzanne would always call him when she got home from work, and she had not responded or answered any of his phone calls to her dorm. Campus security would state to the parents of Suzanne that college kids disappearing for a day or two was not uncommon, and that they shouldn't worry. But Suzanne's parents were worried. Their daughter was not someone who took risks or ran off to party or anything of that nature. Suzanne was dedicated to school and to her jobs, and she took it all very seriously. She was very mature for a 19-year-old. Campus security would speak with Suzanne's dorm mates, and they reported that they did not hear her return on March 2nd. So we know that something happened between the bus stop and Suzanne's walk to her dorm room. Suzanne's parents would soon access her bank account and see that a $20 withdrawal had taken place at a local ATM, which was located inside a Stewart's convenience store. This occurred at 4 p.m. on March 3rd, a full day after Suzanne had gone missing. From there, a few more days would pass before campus security finally agreed with Suzanne's parents that this was not a normal situation. New York State Police would soon be called in to assist in the investigation. The Stewarts where the withdrawal took place had a camera. The video footage was obtained, but the video did not show the ATM. It was primarily focused on the register area of the store, so police could not be certain who used the ATM with Suzanne's debit card. What is known is that whoever accessed it knew the PIN. The police would focus in on a man wearing a Nike baseball cap who was seen on the video footage. After some time, the man was found and the police would speak to him extensively. Following this, the police did not believe the man had anything to do with Suzanne's disappearance, but they would also state that they could not 100% rule him out. This particular Stewart's in question was 2 miles from the college campus, and according to reports, it was not an area that Suzanne frequented. After my studies into this case, I do not believe that the man in the Nike hat had anything to do with her disappearance. I found a statement made by Suzanne's parents that she would only ever withdraw $20 from an ATM. Knowing this, and knowing that only $20 was taken out of her account, it leads me to believe that this was indeed either Suzanne or someone else that had access to her debit card and PIN. Further reports from the banks would show that 2 other withdrawals of $20 had taken place on March 2nd. One at an ATM near the bus stop in the morning, and one was within Crossgates Mall at around the time Suzanne would have arrived for work. I believe both of these logically make sense that they would have been Suzanne. Now, one other piece of information that sparks questions is, did anyone else know Suzanne's debit card PIN? Well, the answer to that is yes. Her boyfriend knew her PIN number and very well could have been the one withdrawing the cash on March 3rd inside that Stewart's convenience store. Now, before we speculate further, let's dive into a few more pieces of information the police uncovered. One being Suzanne's name tag. Her name tag was located 2 months after her disappearance and around 90 feet away from the bus stop near campus. It was in an area that leads away from her campus, on the opposite side of a parking lot. A lot of speculation about this name tag would ensue, with more information being found that this was an old name tag and not a current one Suzanne was using. So how did it get there? Why was it there? Or who potentially placed it there? Are all questions that come to mind. At the end of the day, the police looked into over 270 leads in this case. Over 300 acres of property were searched, including some wooded areas in the nearby Rensselaer Lake. Nothing was ever found during these searches, and not a trace of Suzanne Lyall has ever been found in the 25 or so years since her disappearance. So let's dive into some theories on the case. One that I want to touch on first is a potential stalker. A friend and co-worker at Babbage's would report to police that Suzanne had been stalked by an unknown man prior to her disappearance. From all reports, Suzanne wasn't overly concerned about it, and to this day, that man has never been identified. The second theory is Suzanne's boyfriend, Richard. From all reports, Richard was controlling and manipulative. Suzanne's mother came out and stated that she had tried to end things with Richard a handful of times, and she just wasn't happy with where their relationship was at. But Richard would always find a way to convince Suzanne to give things another chance. On top of this, why did Richard know Suzanne's debit card PIN? We know for a fact that Suzanne never re-entered the campus dorms. Logs of her access card to the campus were kept, and the last time her access card had been used was during the day on March 2nd. So did Richard do something to Suzanne and then make a withdrawal the next day to steer the police in a different direction? I would say it's highly probable. He knew her PIN, and he knew she would only withdraw $20 at a time. The same idea comes to me about the name tag being found 2 months after the fact, which could be someone trying to plant evidence to confuse investigators. To add to the case against Richard, he initially cooperated with the investigators and gave them an alibi that checked out. He had been playing a computer game online with a friend who ultimately vouched for him. But soon after Richard would obtain a lawyer, he would refuse a polygraph test, and to this very day has never spoken to investigators again. I would ultimately say that Richard, for me, is at the top of the suspects list. Now, the last theory that I want to dive into on this case is one involving the infamous Israel Kesse. Now, one day I would like to do a deep dive into Israel Kesse, so for this video I'm not going to dive too deeply into him, but at the time of Suzanne's disappearance, it is known that Kesse was living around 3 to 4 hours away in Constable, New York. Kesse had in the past asked a victim for their PIN number and had subsequently taken money out of their account. Kesse was also known to use locations like parking lots to scope out his victims. So the question becomes, could Israel Kesse be the man that was stalking Suzanne in the weeks leading up to her disappearance? Israel Kesse would finally be caught and arrested in 2012, but before he could spill the beans on his many murders, he would take his own life in prison at the age of 34, taking everything he had done to his grave. So ultimately, could Kesse have done it? I believe he could have, and one other piece of information that people point to is the NAMUS-45 list. This list was put together based on Kesse computer searches of missing persons. Within those searches, police would find Suzanne Lyall's name. This has led many to believe that Israel Kesse was responsible for the kidnapping and murder of Suzanne Lyall. At the end of the day, this case has remained an unsolved mystery for 2.5 decades. Answers are still being sought after, but few have truly been found. But that doesn't mean good hasn't come from this tragic story. The family of Suzanne started the Center for Hope, a foundation that provides support to the families and loved ones of missing persons. While in 2003, President George Bush would sign Suzanne's Law into effect. This law would require that all police departments immediately notify the National Crime Information Center whenever someone between the age of 18 and 21 is reported missing. This was never done during Suzanne's investigation. If you or anyone you know has any information about the disappearance of Suzanne Lyall, please reach out to the local FBI office in Albany, New York. You can do so by calling 518-465-7551. Any information, no matter how big or small, could help finally bring about some answers in this tragic case.
When you ask around about the disappearance of Craig Frear, the locals of Scotia, New York will all tell you the same thing. He just vanished.
The day my son went missing is etched in my brain. The weather, everything about that day.
June 27th, 2004, Scotia, New York. A 17-year-old high school student on summer vacation gets in his car and travels to his girlfriend's apartment complex. After hanging out for a bit, he leaves her residence. He is last seen entering a nearby stretch of woods. From there, it's as if he simply vanished into thin air. This is the unsolved mystery of 17-year-old Craig Frear. Hey everyone, welcome back to The Cellar. Before we dive into this story, I just wanted to say a few things. First off, some of you have been asking me to find and cover some lesser known stories. I could say today's story definitely hits the mark there. Second, this story is very close to home for me. I grew up in upstate New York, the capital region to be a bit more specific, and this particular story takes place in Scotia, New York, an area I spent a lot of time growing up. In particular, I played in a few bands back in the day, playing bass, guitar, vocals. Yes, that is super young me with the ridiculous haircut. I had many close friends in the Scotia area, so this is a story I always told myself I would cover one day. Now, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, then please hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and also consider joining the channel as a member. It helps a lot, and it's only $2.99 a month. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into today's story. First things first, let's give a little backstory and context. So, Schenectady, New York is a city located about 15 miles or 24 kilometers northwest of the state capital of Albany, New York. If you take a short drive over the Western Gateway Bridge, which travels over the Mohawk River, you will soon find yourself entering the town of Glenville, New York. Now, Scotia, New York is a part of the town of Glenville. It's a quaint village within Schenectady County and has around 7,200 total residents. One such resident of Scotia was 17-year-old Craig Frear. Craig Frear was a popular and athletic 17-year-old who had just finished his junior year at Scotia Glenville High School. Craig was a standout soccer player in high school. He had just been named the varsity captain in preparation for his upcoming senior season, and there were even colleges interested in recruiting him after high school. Craig was 5'11" and weighed around 190 pounds. He had red hair, dimples, and an overall athletic build. From all reports, Craig had plenty of friends. It's actually said that he had friends from various different cliques. It was June 27th, 2004, and Craig's parents, Bill and Veronica Frear, were both busy preparing to throw a barbecue. It was a nice, warm Sunday, and their daughter's birthday was upcoming, and they wanted to celebrate it. Veronica would speak with Craig that morning before he left the house on his way to work. Now, Craig worked at a local grocery store chain called Price Chopper. Price Chopper Supermarkets is an American supermarket chain owned by Northeast Grocery. Its headquarters is located in Schenectady, New York, not far from where I actually used to live. Price Chopper operates a total of 128 stores within 6 states: upstate New York, Vermont, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. Now, I've seen some differing reports, but it appears Craig had worked at his local Price Chopper in the dairy department for at least a little bit of time. After Craig left for work that morning, his mom, Veronica, continued getting ready for the barbecue. After making a grocery list of items they would need, she decided to take a drive to Price Chopper to do her shopping. She figured this would give her an opportunity to pop in and see how Craig was doing. As Veronica arrived at the grocery store, she grabbed a cart and began walking around. She would eventually make her way over to the dairy department, but Craig was seemingly nowhere to be found. She thought this was odd and finished up her shopping before heading home. At home, Veronica began calling around to Craig's friends before she finally located him. She questioned Craig on why he wasn't at work, and he explained that he was running late but was on his way in right now. After hanging up, Veronica began to give it all a bit more thought, and she felt off about her conversation with her son. She was suspicious, so she asked Craig's father, Bill, to stop by the Price Chopper and check in on him. Bill agreed and soon arrived at Price Chopper, but when he too arrived at the dairy department, he found Craig was nowhere to be found. Bill then spoke to an employee who was working that day. What he was told was very unexpected. It turned out Craig had not come to work in well over a month's time. In fact, it had been so long that Craig had been completely removed from the schedule. Bill soon made his way home and shared the news with his wife. Both of Craig's parents were pretty angry and puzzled over what was going on. Veronica soon got on the phone, placing calls to all of Craig's friends. She would eventually get Craig on the phone around 1:30 p.m. that afternoon. She questioned Craig on why he hadn't been to work in over a month. Craig instantly knew his parents were both very irritated, and he tried to tell them that he would talk to them more in person about the ordeal. He told his mom he would be home in around 10 minutes or so, but Craig's father wasn't having it. Bill would get in his vehicle and make his way towards the Cambridge Manor apartments where Craig was hanging out with his girlfriend. Bill would locate Craig's car, but he wasn't sure which apartment Craig was in. After waiting by Craig's car for a few moments, Bill got on the phone to his wife and asked her to call Craig's girlfriend and tell him to get his butt outside. When Veronica called, she was told that Craig had already left a handful of minutes ago. According to Craig's girlfriend, he was supposed to be heading home. Based on this information, it appears that Craig had walked out of her apartment only to see that his father was waiting nearby his car. It appears Craig then changed directions and began walking away from the apartment in the direction of home. From there, it's believed that Craig walked towards the nearby train tracks, which head in the direction of Craig's house. This would be one of the easiest ways for him to walk home while avoiding the main road and his angry father. After following the tracks for a little ways, Craig could then cut through a section of woods and end up in his family's backyard. The entire walk should have taken Craig around a half an hour tops. But as a half an hour, then an hour, then 2 passed by, Craig didn't show up. By that evening, Craig's family assumed he was laying low, knowing that his parents were pretty upset with him. But as darkness fell, Craig's parents became more concerned about his well-being. Now, Craig had run away once in the past, but it only lasted a day or so. Also, this time around, Craig didn't have his car, his wallet, or his cell phone. In a lot of ways, he wasn't prepared to just leave. Veronica would call around to Craig's friends, but no one had seen him. Craig's parents tried to give him some time to show up at home, but they eventually went and contacted the police department. He was reported missing on Tuesday, June 29, 2004. The Scotia Police Department took on the case, and from the beginning, it didn't seem like they were taking it overly serious. They presumed that Craig was a young man, and it was the summer, so he must have been out just having a good time. Days would continue to pass by before the police finally filed the missing persons report on Friday, July 2nd. At this point, Craig had been missing for close to a week. When the investigation first began, locals living in the area were well aware of the story, but the overall news coverage was all but non-existent. This was done somewhat on purpose, as police were concerned that if Craig had run away, news coverage would only scare him from returning. In the end, they waited until the middle of August 15th to be exact, before informing the local news and really spreading the word. The police would start things off by speaking with family and friends. They soon put together searches of the woods and train tracks between Craig's friend's apartment and Craig's home. After multiple searches, no sign of Craig turned up. The family posted flyers and continued to try and get the word out there, hoping their son would one day come home to them. Investigators continued diving into Craig's life. As they talked with more friends, they discovered that something had been off with Craig lately. It seemed like some friends thought Craig was depressed, while others thought the polar opposite. Police also found that Craig not only lied to his family about his job, but he had also been keeping it a secret from his friends. From what's been reported, Craig had also been a lot less social as of late, which leads to the question, what was going on in the life of Craig Frear? Soon, days turned to weeks and weeks turned to months. The case seemed to be at a standstill. Tips would come in, but each one would lead the police in a new dead end. 4 months after it all began, the Frear family retained a private investigator. The family felt that the Scotia Police Department wasn't doing enough to find their son, and they wanted to make sure no stone went unturned. The private investigator would take the family's computer and have it analyzed by professionals. In the end, the results didn't reveal much. As more time continued to go by, the case grew cold. Years would pass by with no answers as to what happened. In 2006, the New York State Police would take over the case. This provided some fresh eyes and resources into the investigation. As the state police took over, a new tip came in about Craig. 3 middle school boys reported seeing Craig on the railroad tracks the day he vanished. Police would speak with these young men, but the details led them to question the validity of this claim. The middle school boys described Craig as wearing a long-sleeve shirt and having a book bag on. This goes against what Craig was actually wearing the day he went missing: a short-sleeve white t-shirt and jeans. Also, Craig's book bag was not taken with him. It was left behind. The tip about the middle school kids, by all accounts, seems like it may be accurate, but these kids most likely saw Craig on another day. Either way, police do not believe this sighting had anything to do with the day he disappeared. Diving into the facts around Craig's life a little bit more, it was found out that Craig had been potentially dabbling a bit in smoking pot. See, Craig had a lot of friends. Some were a part of his soccer team, and some were labeled as troublemakers. It appears Craig may have been hanging out with these troublemakers on a more frequent basis leading up to his disappearance. Years after Craig went missing, police would find out that one of these friends was keeping a secret. See, leading up to Craig's disappearance, he had lost his wallet and driver's license. He would replace the wallet, but not the driver's license. It would soon come to light that his wallet had actually been found. See, the parents of one of Craig's friends would notify police that they found Craig's wallet hidden in their son's bedroom. When they first found the wallet, they were afraid to go to the police as their son had been in trouble with the law before. Their son also stated that he was afraid to say anything about it because of his past run-ins with the law. Police would bring the young man in for questioning, and it's not clear how the police came to this determination, but from all reports, they deemed that he had no involvement in Craig's disappearance. Now, it's also been reported that Craig was not only smoking, but he may have been selling a bit on the side. People speculated whether or not there was a connection between this and his disappearance. This was also followed up on by the police department, and they were unable to find any connection. Now, with no new leads and the case growing colder by the day, the focus soon shifted to finding out why Craig had stopped going to Price Chopper. Did putting these pieces together hold the answers to this case? Well, Craig's mom would soon recall a weird moment with her son. There had been a day where Craig had come home from work. When he did, he showed off to his mom that an older woman had given him her number. He seemed proud of this moment, but Craig's mom said she saw it as a little odd because the handwriting on the paper seemed manly in nature. Now, did this really mean anything, or was she just reading into it a little too much? Some questioned whether Craig may have been hiding things about his sexuality. Did Craig meet someone at work? Did he stop showing up to work in order to avoid that certain someone? The police would conduct countless interviews with co-workers and drivers at the Price Chopper, but in the end, they found no direct connection with Craig's disappearance. Seemingly, another dead end. Years would go by before another bombshell piece of information was dropped in this case. Nick, a co-worker of Craig's, would speak about how he was certain he saw Craig in the passenger seat of a vehicle traveling north on Route 50 in Glenville, north of Scotia. This was around 2 days after Craig had disappeared. When he first saw Craig, he didn't think anything of it until he found out he was missing. According to Nick, the vehicle stopped at a traffic light at Sheffield Road and proceeded to turn left. This sighting was reported as being sometime between June 27th and July 2nd, 2004. Now, many questioned why this information took so long to come out. Even investigators said they doubted this piece of information as it wasn't reported to them back in 2004. But Nick apparently countered by saying he did report this information to the police. See, the Price Chopper Nick worked at was in Glenville, so the Glenville police were the ones to take the report. But it was the Scotia Police Department who were running the investigation. So there is a chance that this information wasn't properly passed along to the Scotia Police Department. This sighting has been talked about and debated over for years. Nick has stuck to his story, while investigators question the validity of it all, as according to them, they were not informed back in 2004. If this information is in fact true, then Craig may have left on his own accord and may still be out there somewhere. His family certainly hopes that is the case. In the end, we simply do not know what happened to Craig. Now, before I touch on some theories, I want to make it very clear. Some of these ideas are simply speculative in nature. I did a lot of research and dove into some sites where internet sleuths have been discussing this case for a long time. Also, having lived near Scotia, I've heard things myself over the years. So now let's dive into some thoughts. First, could Craig have been hit by a train? Well, police did a thorough search of the area and the train tracks. Also, Amtrak never reported any possible evidence that someone may have been hit by a train in that area, so I think the idea that Craig was hit by a train is out the window. Now, one piece of info I want to touch on is Craig's parents. There have been reports that Craig and his father had a very strained relationship. From what's been discussed, Craig's parents were pretty upset with him about him losing his job. His father even drove over to the girlfriend's apartment that day to confront him. Did Craig see his father and decide he didn't want to deal with any of it? Did this cause Craig to run away or take his own life? It's certainly a possibility. It's said that Craig's parents eventually separated after he disappeared, and his father would eventually pass away, never knowing what happened to his son. Now, I am not one to point fingers at a grieving family, but it does sound like Craig and his parents may have been at odds with one another. I could certainly see him wanting to get away from a tough home life. Truth is, the only people who know for certain how his home life was is Craig himself and his parents and siblings. Now, could Craig have been seeing someone secretly? Was there a male truck driver at Price Chopper that he was seeing? Was Craig wrestling with his sexuality? Was he fearful of coming out about this to his parents? Could this have resulted in him running away with someone and starting a new life? I guess it's all possible, but I do want to point out that Craig's social security number has never been used in all the years since he went missing. He never used it to open a bank account or apply for a job of any kind. So could he have started a new life? I mean, others have done it, so I could see it as a possibility for sure, but in no way would it be an easy thing for a 17-year-old to accomplish. Another idea is Craig met foul play while walking home. Maybe Craig did walk towards the train tracks, and maybe he did make his way towards home and attempted to cut through the woods leading to his house. I think it's a little hard to imagine that someone would try to harm him or kidnap him in the middle of the afternoon, but it could be possible. I do want to point out that no physical evidence of Craig was ever found in all of the searches done of the area. This doesn't mean nothing happened, but if something did, then we may never know the truth. Staying on this same thought process, I want to touch on the last place Craig was known to have been for sure, his girlfriend's. Now, I've seen this reported in many ways. It was his friend's apartment, it was his girlfriend's apartment, and it was his ex-girlfriend's apartment. The truth is simply not known for certain, but some have speculated that she may know more than she has ever let on. Did she break up with Craig? Did she have another man in her life that she had harm Craig? It's pure speculation, but I've seen it discussed enough times on different forums that I think it needs to at least be entertained. I also saw some people who reported that this friend of Craig's stopped cooperating with the police and that she may have painted her apartment shortly after he disappeared. Once again, this is simply speculation. There's just nothing out there to prove that there's any truth whatsoever to those claims. With all that said, Craig Frear has now been missing for almost 21 years. After all this time, it feels like answers are still so far from being found. If you or anyone you know has any information about this case, then please be sure to contact the New York State Police at 518-630-1700. You never know if some small piece of information that you have is enough to fill in the spaces in this long-standing puzzle. Now I want to take a moment to ask all of you, what do you think happened to Craig Frear? I would love to hear what you all have to say, so please be sure to like the video and leave a comment down below. I try my best to respond to every single person who leaves one. With that said, I want to take a quick moment to send my deepest condolences to all of Craig Frear's family and friends. I truly hope they find answers one day. On May 11th, 2011, 6-year-old Timothy James Pitzen was dropped off at a school in Aurora, Illinois, by his father, James Pitzen. After dropping off his child, James would head to work. At around 8:15 a.m. that morning, Timothy's mother, Amy Fry Pitzen, would arrive at the school to pick Timothy up. She would inform the school of a family emergency and proceed to take Timothy away with her. Later that afternoon, James Pitzen would arrive back at the school to pick up his son. But to his shock, he was told Timothy had already been picked up earlier that day by his mother. James would try numerous times to reach his wife, but the calls he made kept going to voicemail. The following day, James filed a missing persons report, while Amy and Timothy began a 2-day trip to the zoo and numerous water park resorts. 3 days later, on May 14, 2011, Amy Fry Pitzen was finally located in a hotel room in Rockford, Illinois. She had apparently taken her own life, leaving nothing more than a cryptic note behind. As for her son, well, Timothy Pitzen was nowhere to be found. This is the story of the bizarre and tragic disappearance of Timothy James Pitzen. Timothy James Pitzen was born in Aurora, Illinois on October 18, 2004. He was the only child of James Pitzen and Amy Fry Pitzen. Timothy was described by those that knew him as being an extremely happy, outgoing child. He loved what most 6-year-olds love, things like playing on the playground, going to school with his friends, and much more. On May 11, 2011, Timothy and his dad James hopped in their vehicle and began their typical trek to school. The day felt like many days prior as James pulled up and began dropping Timothy off. According to his father, Timothy hopped out of the vehicle, told his dad that he loved him, and began running towards his awaiting teacher. James had no idea in that moment that this would be the last time he would see his son, Timothy. James proceeded to work from there as Timothy went and settled into his classroom. Not long after, at around 8:15 a.m., Amy Fry Pitzen, Timothy's mother, would arrive at the school. She would proceed to the main office and inform the school that a family emergency had occurred and she needed her child brought to her for dismissal. Amy and Timothy would leave the building, beginning a chain of events that would haunt Timothy's entire family for years to come. Later that same day, James Pitzen would arrive back at the school, expecting to see his son and talk to him about how his day had went. But to his shock and dismay, he would be informed by the school that Timothy had already been picked up hours earlier. James would confirm with the school who picked his son up, and he would immediately get on the phone and attempt to contact his wife, Amy. But every effort at reaching her would be sent straight to her voicemail. James wasn't overly concerned at first. He felt confident that Timothy was at least safe with his mother. From all reports, the couple had been going through some marital issues recently, and James presumed his wife was just upset with him and decided to take Timothy away with her to go do something for the day. But as the day turned to night, and the night turned to the following day, James became more concerned. He had yet to hear a word from his wife at this point, and so James proceeded to call in a missing persons report to the Aurora Police Department. The police immediately entered Timothy's name into a national database of missing children, but they did not issue an Amber Alert. The reason being that Timothy was with his mother and was not believed to be in any danger. Also at this point, Amy had not committed any kind of crime, so the police did what they could, and the search for the pair would begin. Based on information collected by the police, Amy and Timothy would first travel to the Brookfield Zoo on May 11th. Following their trip to the zoo, the pair made their way to the Key Lime Resort located in Gurnee, Illinois. The resort is described as a 65,000 square foot aquatic playground that has something for all ages to enjoy. On May 12th, the pair soon headed off to another water park, the Kalahari Resort. The Kalahari Resort is located in Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin, and is known as Wisconsin's largest water park. The indoor water park is listed as being 125,000 square feet. Prior to checking into that resort, video footage was obtained of the pair stopping along the way. They purchased clothes, a toy car, and a small craft kit at a convenience store. They also purchased gas and drinks off Interstate 94. On May 13th, Amy and Timothy would check out of the Kalahari Resort. The police obtained video footage of the pair holding hands as they checked out and left. This would be the last video footage of Timothy and Amy together. After they left the resort, the pair would begin driving south on Interstate 39 and then west on Interstate 88 towards Sterling. It was at this point between 12 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. that Amy would finally make some phone calls to family members. She phoned her mother and brother-in-law. From what's reported, the conversations were normal in nature, and family even heard Timothy in the background. Amy would assure them that they were safe and not in any danger at all. Timothy's father, James, was never called or contacted in any way during this time frame. Once the calls came to an end, Amy drove about 170 miles towards Sterling, along the Rock River, about 80 miles west of Aurora. She then abruptly turned her cell phone off for the last time, making her next moves impossible to track. Later at around 7:25 p.m. on May 13, 2011, cameras would capture Amy at a Family Dollar in Winnebago. Winnebago is located just west of Rockford, Illinois. At the dollar store, Amy would purchase a pen, some notepaper, and envelopes. She would then travel to a grocery store at around 8 p.m. In both videos of her movements, Timothy was nowhere to be found. Following these two stops, a handful of hours would go by before Amy proceeded to check into the Rockford Inn in Rockford, Illinois. While in the hotel room, Amy would write a note before proceeding to consume a large amount of antihistamines. At some point that night or during the next morning, Amy would take her own life by using a blade on her wrists and neck. Her body would be found the following day at around 12:30 p.m. on May 14th. Left at the scene was a note, and within that note it read, "Well, some people leave notes, some don't. I couldn't decide, so this is my version. Tim is somewhere safe with people who love him and who will take care of him. You will never find him. To whomever finds me, Sorry about the mess, Amy. Now, before we dive any further into this case, let's give a little bit more backstory into James and Amy. From my research, Amy was someone that had been battling with depression for quite some time. When she met James, she had recently gone through a divorce with her first husband. This divorce had really shattered her world and had left her in an extremely dark place. It seems like James really tried to do all he could to help Amy. But what some people don't realize with someone battling depression is that you simply can't just fix them. I've battled with depression my entire life. Since I was around 15, 16 years old, it has been something that I have learned to manage and work through, but it is not something that ever just fully goes away. It finds new ways to manifest in your brain, and even when life is seemingly in a good place, it doesn't take much for it to feel like the entire weight of the world is once again resting on your shoulders. Amy was constantly battling this, and it got to a point where she had attempted to end her being in 2003. When Amy finally got pregnant with Timothy, it's been reported that she was the happiest that she had been in quite some time. Having Timothy and becoming a mother gave Amy a new purpose in life, and she absolutely adored her child. But as I stated prior, the dark cloud can come back without warning, and I am no doctor, but it appears Amy's battle was a chronic one that sadly ended up getting the best of her in the end. Let's go ahead and talk about some more info on Amy and James' relationship. This info I think helped shed a bit of light into Amy's mindset. From what has been stated by James, he had found on his wife's phone that she had gotten back into contact with her ex-husband. Texts and calls were found, and this really upset James. Up to this point, James had tried to give and be everything that Amy would need or want, and finding that she was back in contact with her ex really broke him. This did cause him to lash out at one point, where he told her that if she wanted to leave or go be with someone else, that she could go and he would take custody of Timothy. From my research, it's believed that Amy was extremely fearful of losing her son. Given her past battles with depression, she felt like James could potentially divorce her and take full custody of their child. This ultimately may have planted a seed in her head that just kept growing until she felt like she had no choice but to do something about it. Now, before you all say what a terrible husband James is, I think it's important to point out that interactions like this can happen in any marriage. If anyone found their significant other speaking secretly to a former lover, well, I think many of us may react in some sort of a similar manner. From my research, I think James wanted nothing more than his marriage and family to work out and stay together. Now, we only know what's been said and reported, and we don't have a way to rewind and see how their marriage truly was. Given that Amy is no longer alive, it's impossible to get her insight into what was truly going on in her life and in her head and in her marriage. Now let's go ahead and dive into some more information within this case. Forensic reports found that the knife Amy had used contained only her blood, but there was blood found in the back seat of the car Amy was driving. The police stated that the amount found was concerning, and it did come back as being Timothy's. Following this revelation, family members would come out and inform the public and police that the bloodstains found within Amy's car were believed to have been Timothy's from when he had suffered a nosebleed earlier that month, not from an incident occurring during the pair's fateful final trip together. Police would also find that Timothy's backpack, as well as the toys and items purchased on the trip, were all missing. Amy's cell phone was also missing, but in 2013, it was finally located alongside the road on Illinois Route 78 north of Mount Carroll, Illinois. It appeared the phone had been thrown out of a moving vehicle. This break in the case had police hopeful that they would be able to piece more of the puzzle together, but sadly, no new evidence was discovered within Amy's cell phone. Police would go to great lengths examining Amy's vehicle. After looking at and analyzing the dirt and grass found on the underside of the car, they were able to reveal that the car had been parked at some point within a grassy area, possibly near a stream, but still close to a highway. This information helped the police come up with some ideas of where the car may have been, and many searches would follow. But sadly, no sign of Timothy or what may have happened was ever found. Another piece of information that may seem small, but I will come back to when we talk about theories, is that of the set of clothes Amy was last wearing when she was last seen checking out of the resort with her son. This set of clothes was not found in her car or hotel room and has yet to ever be found. I think this piece of information can point in a darker direction, but we'll get to that shortly. One last piece of information I found interesting was that of Amy's iPass. Amy had an iPass on her car, and this device reads what tolls you go through and then bills you later on. Where I lived in New York, it's called Easy Pass. Down here in North Carolina, they call it NC Quick Pass. Now, this iPass was never located, but records from it showed that earlier that very same year, Amy had made 2 trips to the hotel where she died. It also showed some of the other more rural locations she visited on her fateful final trip with Timothy. From what's been reported, there was never any apparent reason as to why Amy traveled to any of these rural locations. This information ultimately led police to believe that this final trip with her son was very well pre-planned months and months in advance. Now, the search for Timothy was very extensive. They performed numerous searches throughout Illinois, and the case would gain national coverage with Timothy's picture being shown consistently on TV. Now, I won't dive into all of it, but there were reported findings of Timothy over the years, including a massive hoax that hoax was absolutely a despicable thing to do, and those involved ultimately paid the price for what they did, and to this day, no new evidence has ever been found within this case. All these years later, Timothy is still missing, and his father is still waiting and hoping to one day be reunited with his long-lost son. Now we will dive into theories on this case. The 2 most obvious we will cover first. Either A, Amy found a family or someone to give Timothy to, and they have been taking care of him since, or B, Amy took the life of Timothy prior to ending her own. Now, looking at both objectively, I think it's easy to say both are very plausible. Amy was clearly not mentally well, and the idea that she may take her kid for a fun-filled final couple days before ending it all seems completely plausible. Was the dirt and grass found under her car a sign that she had found a place to bury his body? It certainly could be. There are numerous hours between the final phone calls Amy made and her being spotted at a dollar store. It's easy to say that there would have been plenty of time for Amy to commit such a heinous act. At the same time, Amy left a note and stated that Timothy was in the care of people that loved him. Why say such a thing if he wasn't still alive? Now, the idea that Amy found people to take Timothy is something I could believe, but I also question whether or not he could be cared for and kept hidden for all this time. This story gained national news coverage, and you would think that someone would have spotted the boy by now. But in the same breath, there have been cases where people are found decades later, so I don't think it can be ruled out one bit. One piece of information people lean to in order to support Theory B is the change of clothes that were never found. Amy changing her outfit and disposing of it could have taken place after the crime had been committed. Perhaps she got blood on her clothes and ultimately didn't want anyone to know what she did to her child. I think given her mental state and what she ultimately did to herself, this theory is extremely plausible. Now, let's look again at the theory that she gave Timothy away to someone else. I watched a very well done video by Nick Crowley on this story, and within his video he brings up a theory about Timothy not actually being James's son. When James and Amy met, James was battling cancer. James ultimately overcame the cancer after numerous chemotherapy treatments. A side effect of chemo can be infertilization in men. When Timothy was born, the couple viewed this as a miracle, but some have theorized that maybe this wasn't what it appeared to be. Some believe that Amy may have actually gotten pregnant with another man, and ultimately Amy took Timothy to his real dad to be raised secretly moving forward. Now, this is just a theory, and not one with a lot of information to back it up, but I did find it to be very interesting, and nonetheless, I wanted to mention it here. The police went through Amy's cell phone once it was found, and they located an email account she secretly had, and nothing was ever found indicating she had prior contact with anyone about taking Timothy. The fact that nothing has ever been found is puzzling, and to me, it makes it hard to believe that she just gave Timothy away. But another interesting thought I looked into was that of the Amish. I saw this idea touched on and thought it was also very interesting. The idea is that Amy located some Amish people living within that area of Illinois. Now, as far as I know, the Amish don't have to register their children or send them to public school. So in theory, she could have given him away to be raised up within an Amish community. The Amish are more off the grid and don't typically get involved in watching the news or having Facebook or YouTube or any of that. It's completely plausible that Timothy could be raised within their community and stay hidden all this time without anyone knowing any better. For me, this theory is extremely interesting, but once again, we don't have a lot to back it up. If I had to pick a theory that I would like to believe in 100%, it would definitely be this one. This one would make sense as to why Timothy has never been found, and would also make me feel better as a parent knowing Timothy was still alive and doing well. Out of all the theories we touched on, I'd love for this one to be the actual answer to this puzzling story. Now, I ask the hardest question. Could Amy have taken her son's life? As of this moment, we still have zero evidence to support things one way or another. Aside from that blood that was found within the car, there's nothing to say she did that, and many believe the nosebleed is what ultimately caused the stain found within the vehicle. I myself, like many, would like to hang on to the hope that Timothy is still out there somewhere in the world living his best life right now. What we know is that Amy was in a clearly dark place. It's clear she wanted to give her son an amazing 2 days between the zoo and water parks. It's also clear that Amy wanted to leave this world, but she did not want to leave Timothy with his father. Why she was so opposed to this idea, we just don't know. Could James have been abusive? It's possible, but we have nothing to back up that idea. It has now been 13 years since Timothy was last seen or heard from. I ask that you keep your eyes open, and if you have any information that can help in solving this case, I encourage you to come forward now. I will share a phone number in the description box below that can be called. I will also take a moment now to share an age progression picture of what Timothy may in fact look like today. So what do you all think? Let me know in the comment section below what your thoughts or theories may be on this case. In sharing this story, I hope we're finally able to find some answers as to what happened to Timothy James Pitzen. In September of 2015, a 32-year-old man named Henry went missing in the early morning hours. Henry had spent most of his night out drinking before catching a ride from a friend of his to a local gas station. After being dropped off, Henry would have multiple phone calls with his wife as he supposedly walked home from the gas station. One of those phone calls would lead to a terrifying voicemail that the police and true crime community have focused in on. That voicemail is enough to send shivers down your spine. What happened to Henry McCabe? In today's video, I'm going to do my best to break down one of the most perplexing cases I have ever encountered. This is The Voicemail of Nightmares, the Henry McCabe story. Before we dive into today's story, I want to give a quick reminder. If you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please consider subscribing and turn the notifications on so that you never miss a new upload. You can also find my merch store and social media links, as well as the link to my audio-only podcast version of my episodes, all below in the description box of every one of my videos. With that said, let's not waste any more time and dive into today's story. 32-year-old Henry McCabe was a Liberian man who lived in Mounds View. Mounds View is a city in Ramsey County, Minnesota, United States. Mounds View is part of the Twin Cities metropolitan area and is located just north of Minneapolis, Minnesota. The population in that area is listed as being around 13,000 residents in total. Henry worked as a tax auditor for the Minnesota Department of Revenue. From all reports, Henry was a dedicated husband and father. Now, this next piece of information isn't 100% validated, but according to Henry's wife, Corrine, Henry's father had been in politics in Liberia. At some point, while still living in Liberia, Henry's father was poisoned. This led to Henry and his brothers fleeing the country and coming to America. According to information gathered within this investigation, Henry had dreams of one day returning to Liberia and running for president. To give you all some more context, Liberia is a country on the West African coast. It is bordered by Sierra Leone to its northwest, Guinea to its north, Ivory Coast to its east, and the Atlantic Ocean to its south and southwest. It has a population of around 5.5 million people. The country covers an area of 43,000 square miles or 111,369 kilometers. To put this into greater context, Liberia is slightly larger than the state of Ohio. Liberia has large levels of poverty throughout the country, while corruption runs rampant at every level of Liberian society. This makes Liberia one of the most politically corrupt nations in the entire world. With that said, we will now dive into the events of September 6th and 7th, 2015. From what has been gathered in this case, we will first discuss the events that have been corroborated by the police. Henry McCabe would attend a barbecue the night of September 6th. At the barbecue, Henry would speak with a man named William. William and Henry both knew each other, but had not been anything more than acquaintances prior to September 6th. Eventually, William and Henry would leave the barbecue and head over to Henry's place. They hung out briefly before Henry asked William to drive him to a club to meet up with some friends of his. Along the way, Henry would make a stop at an ATM. Henry took out $200 from his bank account at around 11:24 p.m. This was verified by the police using the ATM surveillance video. Also, based on what was viewed in the video, it did appear that Henry may have already been intoxicated as he seemed unsteady within the footage. From there, William would drive himself and Henry to a club called C'est La Vie, which is located in Spring Lake Park. If you look at the map, marker B is where the club was located, and marker A is roughly the area where Henry and William were traveling from. According to reports, Henry had quite a bit to drink that night. When the night finally ended, William stated that he drove Henry home, and while doing so, Henry called his wife, and they argued before Henry hung up on her. After the call, Henry asked to be dropped at the Super America gas station. This occurred between 2 and 2:15 a.m. This piece of information will later be found to be incorrect, but we will get there. What we can corroborate is that phone calls between Henry and his wife did occur. One of those phone calls to Henry's wife, Corrine, would result in her becoming concerned over Henry's well-being. She later told police that Henry wasn't making sense, so Corrine would three-way call William's friend, Timmothy. That call would end up going to voicemail. Now, I have seen this reported differently, so I want to make it clear that it's hard to 100% corroborate this information. I have seen numerous articles report consistently that this voicemail was left on Henry's wife's phone, while I have also seen information that this voicemail was left on Timothy's phone via the three-way call Corrine made to Timothy while on the phone already with her husband. There's a channel called The Missing Enigma who did an unbelievable deep dive into this case. I highly recommend you check it out if you want to dive into this story and other stories even further, but according to his investigation into the case, the voicemail was indeed created via the three-way call that was made. Either way, before we move forward even further into this story, I want to now play the full voicemail for you all to listen to. Following this call, Corrine did not speak with her husband again that morning. On September 8, 2015, Henry's friend Timothy would contact the Mounds View police to report Henry missing. It had been days since Timothy had heard from Henry, and after calling him frequently and getting his voicemail, he had grown concerned about his friend. Police would head to Henry's apartment and found it was unlocked. They entered the residence and surveyed the scene but found nothing suspicious within. Now, it's not clear when, but Henry's wife Corrine would also contact the police to file a missing persons report on her husband. Now, this wasn't reported, but from everything I have gathered, it appears the married couple were estranged with each other at the time. as Henry had his own apartment separate from where Corrine was living. Also, according to Corrine herself, she had been in California for work and had been gone since August 14th, so she was a pretty long distance away from her husband when everything transpired. The police would begin speaking with everyone connected to Henry. The police would speak to William, who gave his statement of events. William stated he went to the barbecue and spoke to Henry there. He confirmed that Henry did indeed stop at the ATM and he took out money before they headed to the C'est La Vie Club. Eventually, William would proceed to leave the club before Henry hopped in the car with him and asked for a ride home. According to William, Henry was arguing on the phone with his wife at the time. William would begin driving, and eventually, Henry hung up on his wife and told William to drop him off at a gas station. William would tell police that he dropped Henry off at the Super America gas station between 2 and 2:15 a.m. William also stated that Henry had been drinking quite a bit that night, and at some point Henry's friend, Jonathan, took Henry's wallet from him to stop him from buying more alcohol. From there, William claims he was more than willing to drive Henry home that night, but for some reason, Henry had insisted on being dropped off at that gas station. According to William, he never saw Henry again after he dropped him off. Henry's friend, Jonathan, was also interviewed by police. He was at the club that night with Henry and William, and corroborated that all three had indeed been there together. He also told the police that he did indeed have Henry's wallet still in his possession. He also told police that he had spoken to Henry on the phone after the club, and that Henry told him he was at home, but according to Jonathan, it didn't sound like he actually was. Jonathan also told the police that it sounded like Henry had gotten into an altercation while on the phone with him. From there, the police would head over to speak with staff at Henry's work. They did find that Henry had recently received a poor work review back on July 31st. Henry had also expressed to coworkers that he was having some family troubles, but he did not elaborate on what exactly was going on within his personal life. I believe tensions between Henry and his estranged wife may have been getting the better of him. With what the police had gathered up to this point, their biggest lead was the gas station. The police would soon travel to the Great America gas station and check the surveillance video. After looking through the footage, they could not find any sign of Henry or William's car pulling into the lot to drop Henry off. Police would soon circle back and speak to Henry's wife, Corrine, once again. Corrine would provide more details to the police about the night Henry went missing. She informed them that when she spoke to Henry, he wasn't making any sense. This is when she disclosed to the police that she had called Henry's friend Timmothy through three-way calling to go pick up Henry. According to Corrine, Timmothy did not answer, and this is where the terrifying voicemail was created. Now, you're going to see small discrepancies within the story. I've tried to dig deeper, but it's unclear if these discrepancies are just small mistakes or something more nefarious. Police would soon speak to Jonathan again. They wanted Jonathan to clarify details from the night Henry went missing. Jonathan informed the police that Henry was hanging out in the VIP section of the club upon his arrival. When Henry came out from the VIP area, he gave Jonathan his wallet, telling him that he owed him for not taking him out on his birthday. He put Henry's wallet in his pocket and would proceed to see Henry sporadically throughout the night. At one point, Henry went to the bar and ordered drinks for a bunch of friends of his. He told Jonathan to pay for the drinks with his card, and when Jonathan went to do so, Henry's card was declined. So Jonathan paid the $70 tab himself. Jonathan hung out at the club until it closed, and when he left, Henry was no longer there. He did inform the police that he found a missed phone call from Henry on his cell phone, timestamped for 1:50 a.m. Henry's wife Corrine would call Jonathan at 2:09 a.m., tell him Henry was acting crazy. Jonathan, with Corrine on the line, proceeded to call Henry. Henry would answer and proceed to tell Jonathan, "Don't mind that woman, she drives me crazy." He also told Jonathan that he was only a minute from his house. Jonathan at the time came to the conclusion that Henry was almost home, so he didn't think there was any further concern to be had at the time. Back at the police station, investigators were hard at work obtaining phone records for Henry's cell phone. This is where the case becomes even more bizarre, as police found that Henry had called a specific number on September 7th at 3:26 a.m. That same number was found to have been called 24 different times on September 7th. It was also called again on September 9th and September 10th, days after Henry had been reported missing. When police looked further into the phone number, they found that it was registered to a cell phone in Texas. but after calling the number, it was discovered that it was no longer in service. The more I research this story, the more I wonder if this phone number could be the smoking gun that cracks this mystery wide open. The police would continue working on the case, and on October 2nd, a new mystery was added to an already puzzling story. A letter was delivered to the New Brighton Police Department. New Brighton is located just south of Mounds View, where Henry lived. The letter stated the following: Henry McCabe, his body next to water, partially buried, needs search dogs to find. Witness who saw burial scared, female, young, asked to come forward, can remain anonymous and will protect. Who wrote this letter? Well, it's simply not known. It's just another piece of the scattered puzzle that everyone desperately wants to find a way to put back together. Up to this point, no sign of Henry had been found. Everyone from investigators to family and friends were left puzzled as to what happened to Henry McCabe. As the month of October carried on, the police would finally get their hands on some information that would steer them in the right direction. On October 9th, Henry's wife, Corrine, would contact the police. She wanted to inform them that she had figured out a way to access Henry's Google Timeline location service from his cell phone. Accessing this allowed her to see the last tracked movements of Henry's phone. When police analyzed the information, they found that Henry's phone's last location was at the intersection of Rice Creek Road and Benjamin Street in Fridley. Upon investigation of the nearby area, an officer noticed a Holiday gas station. The officer spoke with the gas station manager and would review the surveillance video. Within that video, the officer discovered footage of Henry McCabe being dropped off at around 1:50 a.m. This gas station location is roughly 4.3 miles south from the C'est La Vie Club. It's also 2.3 miles south of the gas station that William originally told police he had dropped Henry off at. Now, the first question is, how did William get the gas station so wrong? Well, William would later tell police that he must have driven farther than he originally thought, and that he dropped Henry off at the Holiday gas station and not the one he originally thought he dropped him off at. The police weren't 100% convinced, but after speaking with William's wife, she did verify that he had indeed arrived home that night around 2:25 a.m. Now, you could say that maybe his wife was covering for him, but at the same time, it's just as easy to say that William had been drinking that night. It's hard for him to admit to the police just how much he may have actually drank. Also, sometimes gas stations can all look very similar. My view on this is that I think William is telling the truth. The only reason I say this is that the footage found at the other gas station does indeed show Henry getting out of the vehicle around 1:50 a.m. This is right around the 2 a.m. time frame that William had said he dropped Henry off. If William was straight up lying, why would he tell the police the correct time, but not the correct gas station? Now, Henry's wife Corrine was also looked into further by the police. They found it very suspicious that she simply went to bed after her final phone calls with Henry. If she had truly been concerned about him, why didn't she do more to make sure he made it home? On top of that, the police found a discrepancy within her story, as Corrine initially told police that the phone call to Timothy's phone that resulted in the voicemail was a misdial. But after looking at phone records, it's clear that Corrine was actually on the phone with her husband for at least a few minutes before the three-way call to Timothy was made. Ultimately, Corrine stated she did not remember what was discussed on this phone call with her husband, but it does feel like Corrine has withheld some information at times with the police. Now we will jump ahead to November 2nd, 2015. The New Brighton Police Department was contacted and soon dispatched to Rush Lake due to a reported body being found within the water. Police would recover a body and it was taken in for an autopsy to be performed. Using dental records, the police were able to positively identify that this body was indeed that of 32-year-old Henry McCabe. Henry had finally been found, but the mystery as to what happened to him had only just begun. Henry's body was recovered with his cell phone in his pocket, a VIP club wristband on his wrist, and he still had his gold wedding ring on his finger. Upon initial inspection of the body, no signs of physical trauma were found. On November 18th, following a toxicology report, Henry's death was ruled probable drowning in fresh water. Henry had a blood alcohol count of 0.53, but it was noted that this number could have been higher at the time of death. They also found 0 signs of foul play. The location of Rush Lake is over 2 miles from where Henry was dropped off at the gas station. This case is bizarre to say the least, and we really don't have any concrete answers to resolve what exactly happened to Henry. We know he went to the barbecue on September 6th. We know he then hit an ATM before heading to the club to drink for a few hours. We know he was dropped off at the gas station around 1:50 a.m., and we know that terrifying voicemail came in around 2:28 a.m. Could Henry have made the walk all the way to Rush Lake on his own while being inebriated that night? I guess it's possible, but what's most bizarre is the phone number he called 24 times on September 7th. Henry's phone was ultimately found in his pocket, yet somehow his phone called that number again on September 9th and 10th, days after Henry went missing and is presumed to have already been deceased. If Henry had walked and eventually drowned in the lake, then how did his phone place calls to this mysterious number days later? Was Henry placing these calls, or was someone else using Henry's phone at the time? If it was someone else, then clearly something more nefarious took place within this case. As you can see, there are a lot more questions than answers. In the end, the police feel confident that Henry drowned, so I can't discredit that, but it's hard to just accept that he walked and eventually fell into a lake and passed away. My biggest question that I wish I could have answered is, how accurate are his cell phone records? Could there be an error there? Could the calls have come into his phone and not actually have gone out? If Henry's cell phone records are to be believed, then I think it's hard to say that this is an open and closed case, because last time I checked, dead men don't place phone calls. Now, typically I'm a believer of Occam's razor. The simplest answer is usually the correct one, but as we know in true crime, it's not always the case. If we forget the cell phone records, then I think I would lean in the direction that this was just a tragic accident, that Henry was intoxicated, walking home, and tragically drowned in a lake. But with the cell phone records being what they are, it's hard to not believe that there is more to what transpired. Add in that terrifying and bizarre call, and you have yourself quite the nightmare-fueled case. Was this simply an accident? Was there foul play? Was there an animal attack? Was there something supernatural or paranormal going on? I would say at the very least, we can rule out animal attack, as there would have had to have been some sign of that when the autopsy was performed. That leaves accident, foul play, or supernatural paranormal. Now, I love myself a good supernatural story, but we simply don't have any evidence that something like that occurred here. I think, if anything, I lean towards foul play. I think Henry was intoxicated enough that someone could have overpowered him, and Henry may have not had any chance of fighting back. The lack of defensive wounds doesn't necessarily rule out the possibility that Henry was indeed murdered. On that note, I would love to hear from all of you. What do you think happened to Henry McCabe? Also, what do you think was going on within that bizarre voicemail? Please leave a comment below discussing the case. I check all my comments and try to respond to every single one. I would love to further discuss this case with you all. I also want to take a quick moment to send my condolences to all of Henry McCabe's friends and family members. I truly hope you all get answers one day. It was 2013, and a young 21-year-old Canadian student named Elisa decided to travel across the US. This is something that she had wanted to do for some time, and in a lot of ways, this was Elisa's first time going out on her own, without her parents. Being 21, she wanted to see the world, and so on January 26th of 2013, she would board a flight from Vancouver, British Columbia, to the sunny state of California. She would first arrive in San Diego, where she would spend her first few days before taking a train to the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California. After arriving in Los Angeles, Elisa would check herself into the infamous Cecil Hotel. The Cecil Hotel is set in the heart of downtown LA. Some floors in the hotel cater to everyday travelers like Elisa herself, while other floors would cater to short and long-term guests, primarily those that lived in the notorious Skid Row area. The Cecil Hotel itself has had a long and shady reputation, being that it was the scene of numerous suicides, overdoses, as well as the home of the notorious serial killer, Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker, the Walk-In Killer, and the Valley Intruder, was an American serial killer and sex offender. His crime spree would run from 1984 to 1985 in California, where it's believed that he killed 13 people. He was eventually captured, convicted, and sentenced to death. But in 2013, before the death penalty could be carried out, Ramirez would die due to complications from B-cell lymphoma, a form of blood cancer. I plan to dive further into Richard Ramirez and his reign of terror on a future episode on the channel. So that brings us back to January 28th of 2013, when Elisa checked into the Cecil Hotel. She was originally staying in a hostel-style room with other guests. For those that don't know what a hostel is typically a low-cost and shared form of lodging. Guests typically rent a bed while sharing a lounge area and sometimes a kitchen with other roommates. It would not take long before Elisa's roommates started complaining to the hotel of odd behavior with Elisa. From reports, she was acting erratic and causing a constant disturbance amongst the guests that she was sharing the room with. The hotel would swiftly step in and give Elisa her own room. But this would only be the beginning of the erratic and bizarre behavior. January 31st, 2013. After staying at the Cecil Hotel for a handful of days, this was to be Elisa's final day. Her checkout was to be the subsequent morning. She proceeded to phone her parents like she had done every other day on this trip. She would then head out to visit a bookstore known as the Last Bookstore. After looking at the map, this bookstore was located about 0.3 miles from the hotel, a roughly 8-minute walk in total. After returning to the hotel, the real mystery would begin. At 2:30 p.m. that afternoon, Elisa is seen on camera leaving the elevator lift. Her actions from this point on are anything but normal. The footage I'm about to show you all is the last time 21-year-old Elisa Lam would ever be seen alive. As you can see in the footage, the elevators don't close for Elisa. Why were they not closing? That's always been open to a lot of heated debate. Some believe that spirits from the hotel's dark past had a hand in what was happening with her, while others believe someone else was outside the elevator, potentially messing with her. At the same time, Elisa was a young woman who was struggling with bipolar disorder. There's a belief from law enforcement that she had stopped taking her meds and may have been experiencing some sort of manic-like episode during this time. Whatever the answer may be, the footage of Elisa is harrowing to watch. After not hearing from their daughter for multiple days, Elisa's parents would report her missing with the Los Angeles Police Department. They would hop on a flight to LA for a press conference on February 6, 2013. The hotel would be searched extensively, from top to bottom, but no sign of Elisa was found. All her belongings were found to have been left behind in her room, while no hotel worker had remembered seeing Elisa leave the hotel. To even further add to the mystery, no cameras within the hotel would capture Elisa leaving the property. The footage of her in that elevator was all that was left. It was like Elisa had just vanished. But how does someone simply vanish without a trace? Over the following days, the LAPD would recover and then release the elevator footage for the public to view. This footage led to numerous theories and ideas amongst online sleuths. As more and more people were drawn into the case, the ideas surrounding Elisa's disappearance would get more and more bizarre. But ultimately, it wouldn't take too long before we finally got some answers. In the subsequent days after Elisa's disappearance, guests within the Cecil Hotel would begin complaining of low water pressure, along with an awful smell and discoloration in the hotel's water supply. Some reports came in that the water had turned brown, smelled horrible, and had unknown particles floating within it. The hotel would soon have to take action, and they proceeded to send Santiago Lopez, the hotel's maintenance worker, to go investigate the water tanks, which reside on the roof of the building. When Santiago made it to the roof, he discovered that one of the hatches was propped open on one of the water tanks. He would proceed to climb up to check inside. Upon glancing in, he made a horrifying discovery. There he found the decomposing body of Elisa Lam, floating naked and face down in the water. Elisa had finally been found. But what happened? How did a young, 21-year-old woman end up dead in a water tank on the rooftop of the Cecil Hotel? June 20th, 2013, the coroners would officially declare a finding of accidental drowning in the death of Elisa Lam. Even with this answer, there are still so many mysteries to speculate on. Did Elisa climb into the tank herself? Did someone coerce her or throw her in? At the end of the day, we just don't have any definitive answers to any of these questions. The police ruled her case accidental. Her toxicology report would come back, and it showed low amounts of her bipolar medication, leading the police to believe that a manic episode led to her climbing into the water tank. They believe she was not thinking clearly and that she found a way onto the roof and simply climbed in. After entering the tank, she would eventually come to a realization that the water level was not high enough for her to reach the hatch opening. At some point, her clothing would come off. It's believed that she may have taken it off so that it wouldn't weigh her down. Now, there are other theories. Perhaps someone put her in the tank, or potentially coerced her into the tank. I myself could see this as a possibility. I struggled to see her putting herself into the tank on her own. But could I see a man, potentially a man who had shown interest in her, talking her into going for a dip on the rooftop of the hotel? I don't believe it can ultimately be ruled out, but we just don't have anything else to go on with the case. What I do know at the end of the day is that no one should have to suffer such a horrible fate. Floating in a tank of water and coming to a realization that there's no way to get out. Just waiting there until your body gives in from pure exhaustion or hypothermia. I wouldn't wish such an end on anyone. As always, my condolences go out to Elisa Lam and her entire family. If you enjoyed learning about this story and want to dive more into the case of Elisa Lam, I highly recommend you check out the Netflix true crime documentary, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. Brian Shaffer was born February 25, 1979. He grew up in Pickerington, Ohio, which is a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. He grew up there along with his brother Derek, his father Randy, and his mother Renee. Brian would go on to graduate from his local high school in 1997. Following his graduation, he would attend Ohio State University for his undergraduate work. Within 6 years, he graduated with a degree in microbiology, and from there, he would begin his studies at Ohio State's College of Medicine in 2004. Brian was an extremely smart and astute student with his whole life ahead of him. He would continue to work hard at OSU's College of Medicine all the way up until March 31st, 2006, the fateful night that would haunt his family and friends for the rest of their lives. March 31st, 2006 was the last day of school prior to spring break. The day went as normal as can be as Brian finished his day of classes. He would then meet up with his father to go out for a steak dinner that evening. His father would later comment that his son looked extremely exhausted from all the studying Brian had been doing in preparation for his upcoming exams. Brian expressed that he planned to go out with some friends after dinner, and his father told him that he did not think he should do so based on the tired state of his son. Brian would brush off his father's concerns, and at 9 p.m. that evening, he met his friend William Clint Florence at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a bar in the South Campus Gateway complex on High Street in Columbus, Ohio. Now, to add more context to the overall story, Brian had become romantically involved with a woman named Alexis Wagoner. Alexis was a fellow medical student at the university. She and Brian had plans to travel to Miami, Florida during the upcoming spring break week. Alexis and her family both believed that Brian was planning on proposing to her during this upcoming trip. At around 10 p.m. the evening of March 31st, Brian would place a phone call to Alexis, who was at her home in Toledo visiting with her family prior to their planned trip. After this phone call, Brian and Clint would continue bar hopping and working their way around the Arena District. It is reported that Brian and Clint had upwards of 2 shots each at each establishment that they had visited. After midnight, Brian and Clint would meet up with one of Clint's friends, Meredith Reed, in the Short North neighborhood. Meredith would proceed to give Brian and Clint a ride back to the Ugly Tuna Saloona, the plan being to have one last round of drinks together that evening. While at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, Brian would become separated from his friends. Clint and Meredith would make repeated attempts to call and locate Brian, but were unable to. At 2 a.m., the bar closed, and both Clint and Meredith waited outside the bar as patrons exited. They figured Brian would exit the establishment at some point, but to their surprise, Brian never appeared. Now, according to police reports and camera footage that was obtained, Brian, Clint, and Meredith can all be seen on camera going up the escalator to the bar at 1:15 a.m. At 1:55 a.m., Brian is seen talking to some woman outside the bar. He then moves off camera in the direction of the bar, and it's believed that he re-entered the bar at this point. This would be the last known whereabouts of Brian Shaffer. What makes this disappearance so bizarre is that Brian apparently entered the bar and then simply vanished without a trace. Columbus has the most security cameras out of any city in all of Ohio. Footage from outside the Ugly Tuna Saloona, as well as other bars and locations in the area, were combed through extensively by the police. Not a trace of Brian was found amongst any of the numerous cameras that had been checked. Now, it is possible that Brian could have changed clothes prior to exiting the bar, but ultimately, what reason would Brian have had for doing so? The bar also only had one other exit, and at the time, it led into a construction site. This construction site was very difficult to navigate through sober, let alone inebriated, like it is believed Brian was on this particular night. To add to the overall mystery, in 2019, one of the original investigators came out as saying that he was now 100% certain, after reviewing the footage extensively, that Brian did not leave that bar via the escalator. The police would do extensive searches of the area around the bar. They searched the bar itself in detail, they searched sewers nearby, they searched dumpsters in the area. No evidence has ever been found of Brian. So what happened to Brian Shaffer? Those that had been in contact with Brian on this fateful night have all taken and passed polygraphs. All but one person, William Clint Florence. Now, I have looked extensively over the notes and information that's widely available on this case, and at the end of the day, I can see no reason why Clint would refuse to cooperate and take a lie detector, unless he knows something that he never wants brought to light. Does Clint know what happened to Brian? Did Brian meet foul play? Was there an accident? Did Brian ultimately take his own life? Or did Brian make the decision to leave his life behind and start over anew? Brian was under extreme stress at school. To add to this, his mother had very recently passed away that very same month. At the same time, he had a bright future ahead of him, though. He was working his tail off in medical school. All appeared well with a significant other, and it was believed at the time that he was planning on proposing on the trip they had planned that upcoming week to Miami. As much as I would like to believe that Brian is alive and well somewhere in the world, I feel too many signs point to something more nefarious having happened. I also firmly believe that Brian's friend Clint knows more than he has let on all these years later. If Clint ever happens across my video and wants to speak to me in regards to what happened back in 2006, I'd be more than happy to have him come join me for a sit-down interview. Ultimately, though, after all these years, the mystery still remains. What happened to Brian Shaffer on that fateful night in 2006? Numerous tips have come in over the last 17 years, and ultimately none of them have led to anything substantial. Brian re-entered the bar just before closing and seemingly vanished from existence. If you or someone you know was at the Ugly Tuna Saloon on March 31st, 2006, or you're somebody that simply has any information on the possible whereabouts of Brian Shaffer, please report tips or information to the Columbus Police Department at 877-645-8477. A big thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in to another episode. If you enjoy the content that I make here on the channel, then please hit the like and subscribe button. YouTube seems to be suppressing my channel as of late, so a simple like and comment would go a long way in helping the algorithm push my video. Also, you can check the description box below and find a link to my merch store and a link to my membership tier for the channel. For only $2.99 a month, you can help support my channel further, and you get some cool perks to go with it. One of those perks is having your name listed here in the end of each of my videos. So thank you to all my Cellar Dweller members. Also, if you'd like to submit a real-life scary story of any kind, please do so using the email that I have linked in the description box below. As always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything that you do to help support the channel is greatly appreciated. And until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.